We're live. Hey everybody, welcome to the Growing with Fishes podcast. This week we have Eric Weinert joining us. Thanks for joining us, buddy.
Hey, aloha.
Hey, Eric.
He's also known as Drake on YouTube. But for those of you that watched a lot of the KNF videos, he's done a lot of documentation and posting of a lot of the education out there. And many people have watched his very educational videos, and a big thanks to him for posting it. We also have Roger, who survived the hurricane. How's it going, Roger?
Yeah, we're doing all right. I just got minimal damage outside, but you know, there's a lot of people over here suffering. We'll get to that later on in the show a little bit. We'll have a segue. But everything's fine. I made it through okay. You know, my animals through. Huh?
Your girls make it too?
My girls are been harvested.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good.
Yeah. I just built a very expensive privacy fence and it got tore up. So I'm thrilled about that. I've got so much money to go out there and, you know, do it again.
I'm sorry.
You better move past me, huh?
How's it going, Mr. Green Cheese?
What's happening, everybody? Thanks for coming.
You got some girls behind you?
Yeah, it's a lovely. She is lovely, isn't she? Yes, isn't she lovely?
Which one's that one?
Sorry, the light went out. That's Chill Jill. That's one of those. She's a plant who's got her own name. You know, she's half white wizard and half Jack Herrera, an F2. Really select one from like about 60 plants or whatever. She was number 23, I think it was, number of the females, but came out. It was great. This is the one that is hard to, I was talking about before, is hard to pollinate. Has like strange, I don't know, I'm sorry the light went out so early, but has odd pistils that, you know, are difficult to pollinate. Yeah. Cool.
What's up, Martin?
Hey, what's going on?
I'm going down the line on my thing here. Are you doing good?
Yeah, doing good, man. Had a long day at work, but here now, hitting some Wi-Fi.
All right. And then we also have Drake with us. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, oh yeah, thanks for calling me up, man. We actually also just survived a hurricane. two of them actually.
Oh yeah, you're in Hawaii. What? So why don't you want to tell us a little bit about that first, and then tell us about what you're all about and what you do?
For us here, we got about we had a hurricane come and kind of get stuck between the mountains on my island and the mountains on Maui, and it kind of just stopped and rotated. And so me being on the opposite side of the island, it basically sucked in about 60 to 80 inches of rain in 3 days.
Wow.
And so it just dumped, and everything here survived pretty well. You know, the water, it drains really well on this side. There's actually more damage from the lava flow that's happening. It just finished a couple of weeks ago, but has a lot of sulfur damage from that. And then we got hit by another hurricane that just grazed us, and like a week after that. And that one just had some wind damage, had a few bananas fall, but other than that, not much happening that way.
Well, that's good. At least you were able to dodge those a little bit. Yeah.
Luckily, we got just 11 miles behind me. There's a 13, almost 14,000 foot mountain, so it pretty much kicks hurricanes in the teeth. So.
Well, that's good. At least you got a little bit of a rain shot. That's great. So tell us what you're about. You're one of the KNF experts out there that posts a lot of stuff and talks a lot about it, and you've put out all kinds of cool tools for people. Why don't you tell us a bit about what you do and some of the different things that you're all about?
Okay, so I actually graduated school, studied computer science, and thought, man, I'm gonna write some technology and change the world that way. But I realized as soon as I got out that the food we eat is not that great. And so I decided to, instead of just writing software and expecting someone else to do the food for me, I really got in and realized that that's the root of a lot of what we're about is fixing the food supply. And then, that dovetails into the medicine supply as well. Good food, good medicine. And it really, once I started to get into the food supply, I realized it starts with the soil and, what's happening below. And I'm pretty lucky that I got turned on to Korean natural farming relatively early in my growing career. Studying computers, didn't really care about it at all until I graduated, and I was like, oh man. And just happens that my neighbor Ginger John he's a 80-year-old. Well, he's not 80 yet, but he's an old dude growing things. And when you see an old guy that's excited like a kid in a candy store, I learned to pay attention to that. And he was just going on and on about these indigenous microorganisms. And so I started learning about those, and then kind of diving deep from there, and got some microscopy training from Elaine Ingham, and kind of learned how to reverse engineer these techniques that I'd been taught by this Korean master, and started to really apply the science aspects into kind of this magical type of thing where, Eastern mindset is really like, trust the master, and Western mindset is more like, I'm going to cut it open and make sure the master is really telling me what's in there. And so just combination of that, kind of bridging the East and the West, that's what Hawaii's known for. And so bringing those two things together, and really putting that stuff into practice, visiting Korea, and then teaching here. And I, as an instructor, I actually learn more from my students than, like, of course I'm teaching them things, but while I'm teaching, I learn a whole lot. And people encountering different scenarios, different things, and really forces me to go deeper into Korean natural farming and figure out what is happening behind this magic. Because most people that try it, they'll try a recipe or two and just have great success. But it's a whole complete system, and understanding how all those pieces fit together, and how it can enhance what you already got going. Because it's not a mutually exclusive system either. It's an inclusive system. So really, that's what I've been doing, man. Digging deep and bringing the tech knowledge into that, of getting it online, sharing on YouTube. I feel like even this is the tools of our age, reaching out to an audience that may or may not have an idea, and this is what sets us apart in today. And so that's my passion. That's me in a nutshell, I guess.
I love to explain microbes to people when I teach my aquaponic classes. Is like, so in a way, so you have like a food truck. A guy in a food truck can serve, maybe 5 people per 10 minutes, or say 10 people per 10 minutes. He has to make the hot dogs, he has to make whatever, he has to put stuff in the deep fryer, whatever. Or that same chef, give that same chef from the food truck a proper restaurant with prep chefs and sous chefs and a hostess and bus boys and waitresses and waiters, and now he can suddenly do 35 people in that same period of time. That same chef. That's the way that adding microbes is different than running straight hydro. Straight hydro is like that food truck. Yeah, I can have a bunch of food trucks, which is why they need higher nutrients. But if I don't need to have a shit ton of food trucks, if I just have a couple of good restaurants, I can serve the same number of customers, as in the same number of nutrients delivered to the plants, as I can in that, as a good allegory to help people understand why it is that those make such an impact, and help make them more efficient in terms of driving the nutrient to the plant. The chef being the nutrient, and the plant being the customer.
Yeah, and along the lines of that analogy, also the IMO that we're making, I'm not trying to make every single microbe in the system. Really, what you're doing with the IMO is you're making the leaders, like the managers, the kind of superheroes of the soil, and they go in and they motivate all the rest of the microbes, because pretty much any system you're going to be in, there's going to be microbes, and it just takes the leaders to catalyze, to show them how, like, hey, did you know you could dissolve this nutrient this way? Or, hey, I've dissolved this nutrient, can you do something with it? And so the leaders, this catalyst, this bringing indigenous microbes, as well as lactic acid bacteria, which is kind of like a superhero. I explain them as like emergency workers. They come in and they you know, you got a fire, you got a problem, emergency workers will help you.
So a lot of people aren't familiar with Korean natural farming or IMOs, or we'll get to lactobacillus in a little bit, but why don't you explain to people maybe like a quick, like, I've never heard of KNF before, I've never heard of IMOs before, maybe like a quick intro, if you have one.
Quick intro. So a lot of people actually start explaining Korean natural farming by starting with IMO, or indigenous microorganisms. But often when I start to explain to people, I like to start where there's two aspects of it. One is you have the microbes, but the second aspect of it is you have the food, and the food creates like the environment. And if you think about it, two ways where you have people, you know, like you can either get a bunch of really good people together and they'll make the situation better, or you can just, you know, and tell your friends, hey, I got a bunch of food, and your friends will come over to your place and start helping you out. You know, it kind of, hopefully, you know, maybe at least 15% of your friends will come over and start helping you out. But, you know, and that's, so essentially in KNF, Korean natural farming, which we use a lot of acronyms, but I've been trying to explain those acronyms in a way where, instead of calling them by how they're made, I'm explaining them in a way where, for instance, we have a thing called fish amino acid, which is, you know, fish hydrolysate, really good in the vegetative stage of things. And so I've been calling that KNF fuel, because in essence, you know, amino acids is one thing, but understanding that it's fuel, like when you want to start a fire, you're going to put some accelerant, some fuel on the fire, and you can really get that baby cranking. And it's the same concept when you're trying to grow a plant, that in the beginning, it's really important to have that KNF fuel in there, the fish amino acid, to get the fire going. But once your plant is really growing and starting to crank and getting into the later stages, it's just like a roaring bonfire. You don't necessarily want to throw the fuel on it. You know, it might lead to disaster. A little bit of fuel, however, is somewhat necessary. You know, the wood and those kinds of things are continuing in a fire to provide fuel. But yeah, like that kind of stuff, that's what you want to light on fire right there. But bringing, so just kind of bringing these analogies across, and kind of in the vocabulary, changing it a little bit. So essentially there's 9 tools we're working with, and that's the core of Korean natural farming. One of those is, or the two microbial ones are IMO as well as lactic acid. And then the food parts of them are the other 7 tools. And those include seawater, calciums, fish amino acid, and I don't know, maybe you guys can help me out on that one.
WCA?
Yeah. So 2 types of calcium. One from eggshells, which is WCA, and that's like kind of the fruit of a chicken. So it's really like when you're finishing buds and things, it's really helps it to harden up, just like a nice sweet fruit. And calcium really acts as a transporter. So once you've grown this great vegetative plant, you want it to transport the nutrients to where you want it, into the reproductive parts of the plant. So whether you're growing fruits or you're growing buds, the calcium helps to transport that energy there. And then there's also the calcium phosphate, which is made from the bones. And that helps, if you think of it made from bones, it kind of adds structure to your plant. So calcium phosphate helps with root growth, as well as adding structure. And so, you know, you're kind of going, you're making the plant a little fat, and then you're making it tall. You're making it fat, and you're making it tall. And you're using these in at the right time in the right place. And that's, you know, that's basically what we're doing with those tools. So, and I kind of outline those on my website, naturalfarminghawaii.net, in that vocabulary I'm talking about.
Yeah, and you have a lot of great resources there. Do you want to tell people a little bit more about that? So I started blogging in 2009 or so, because
it was easy for me to put up a WordPress, and I had been going to Korea, and so I used the blog as a way to share what I was doing. And you know, I figure show don't tell, and then I'll go learn something someplace, and I'll try to synthesize and summarize. So on my website, I got a bunch of videos, some that are like some series that are 26 hours long, where it's like, you know, if you're really hardcore and you really want to get to the source, go check them out, listen to it, because there's so many gems in there. But for me, you know, I try to then, when I come back, I've been hosting a monthly meeting for the past 9 years. And I always try to come back to the meeting, back to the group, and share with people, hey man, this is what I learned. This is a summary. This is a synthesis. And so I always, you know, I got inspired by Rudolf Steiner, who had people record his lectures. And I was like, well, why don't I just video it? You know, that's the modern recording of it. And so record those things and then share. And that's what I've been doing through those resources.
And you have an incredible archive of videos on your YouTube. For those of you that don't know, why don't you tell people a little bit about that? Because you're probably the single biggest resource of KNF information in full length that I'm aware of.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you talk about full length, it's true. My whole thing is I don't do any editing. My whole deal is basically, you know, I'll start the beginning and the end, and I'll increase the sound volume and enhance the color, and then I upload it. But my whole goal was just to give you raw access to it. And because YouTube's a little hard to find the URL on, I made it real simple, and I bought the domain knfvideo.com. And if you go to there, it just redirects you to my my YouTube channel, just to make it easier for people to find.
Cool.
Nice.
I'll add that
Good idea.
in the description before the end of the show. That's awesome. So a lot of people aren't familiar with IMOs. Do you want to explain to people what that is? A lot of people have never heard of that concept before.
IMO is a pretty advanced concept in Korean natural farming. Like I said, if you just get the food out there and you get the food there, you will get IMOs, because what IMO stands for is indigenous microorganism. And so it means it's the microbes that are living everywhere all the time. But what we mean with Korean natural farming is that they are soil microorganisms that are adapted to your local soil. And even if you're going with something like aquaponics, you'll still get a benefit from this, because those are what are normally colonizing roots. So you can liquefy these, and they're going to be just as happy living in an aquatic environment as a soil environment. And they'll go into the roots, and that's what they know. They're used to living on plant exudates, and they're a little bit different than kind of thermophilic compost microbes, because they're low temperature microbes, and they tend to be somewhat aerobic, but the LAB helps them stay anaerobic and helps them live, and they'll really adapt to what condition they're in. And what's amazing about them is they adapt so quickly. Like they go through a generation about every half hour, and so in a week, it's essentially like 10,000 years have happened. And so what you do is you go through a process of collecting them from a forest or a rich soil environment around you. And you typically collect it on rice, but you could use any kind of starch. Rice has more benefits, like they live in the grains and the kernels. And then you preserve them in sugar, just like Han Solo and carbonite, and it freezes them until the force is ready to awaken. And that's when then you mix it with more water and more food, and then some sort of substrate. And we use rice mill run, like rice hulls or wheat mill run, but you can blend all kinds of things as long as you're getting your fats and your oils and your starches balanced. You can grow these to immense numbers. And it's important then when you're growing them in your pile to keep it below 120 degrees, because you're growing these low temperature soil adapted microbes. And you typically, it takes about a week for them to grow to, you know, which is about 10,000 years. of training. And then you'll blend those again with equal parts of soil and rehydrate them with more foods, and they'll grow for another 10,000 years. And what's happened in that period is you've taken like a fractal copy of what you collected in the forest, and you've now put them into, you've preserved them perfectly, and then you've mixed them into this super environment where they just went to like Leadership Academy, and then for 10,000 years, and then they went to Soil Leadership Academy for another 10,000 years. And then you're going to take that and you can inoculate that now into your soil, and you've created these superheroes. So it's a little bit different than composting, because you're not trying to break things down. You're actually trying to build the microbes up, and you're really focused on growing biology versus decomposition. So you're going to change all your material from what it is into biology, and then you're going to introduce that biology. And the most inexpensive way to then put that into your environment is to then liquefy it again and make a liquid IMO. And once, and because that's so much cheaper to spray, and solids are heavy and you got to use a lot of them. However, if you are doing cannabis plants and you got a small pot, it makes sense to make a batch and top dress on the top, because those guys are so powerful. And really what you're trying to do is bring the top inch to 4 inches of soil to life, because that's where all the oxygen's being exchanged. That's where the air is actually going to penetrate into the soil and create more moisture for you once you got the microbes in there. That's where the action happens in the natural environment. Oh, I can't hear you.
That sounds great. I don't know. Sometimes we mute to make sure we don't.
All right, there you go. So University of Kentucky State actually did a study with lactobacillus ferment, and actually got 15% increased fish growth on top of increased plant growth as well. And that was without adding any other additives, just strictly that added to their fish feed into and they always poured it into where the fish were. And that was the only thing they did. And they had 15% fish growth even. So even for aquaculture, it makes a huge benefit, just to further support, what you were saying.
Yeah, and the lactic acid bacteria are kind of a supporting microbe to the IMO. You can just purely use them, and you it's one of the recipes. But in Korean natural farming, they kind of separate the two out, because what happens is it's just like the police. Like a little bit of police are awesome. Too many police though, and they start causing all kinds of problems. And the other thing about the police is they're expensive. There's a reason not each one of us is a firefighter, and we're not all driving our own fire trucks, and we're not all, policemen, because they're expensive to keep around. And so having that tool to be able to use, and in an aquaponics environment, the LAB is going to be even more beneficial, because you want to really, it helps to eliminate any anaerobic pathogens. Those are what, like I consider kind of the thugs, although that's not really a, you can't argue whether a microbe is good or bad. It's kind of based on environment and all kinds of things. And I have strep throat right now. It's just, I'm not expressing it because I'm a healthy environment and I got enough other microbes to balance the strep, and I got candida in me that's eating dead cells and all kinds of things like that. So I'm not going to say, oh, it's candida is bad. It's all about balance. And that's really what the LAB helps to bring. And the LAB will help to, it'll help to make leaves bigger, all kinds of things. Like it'll make your fruits bigger. The only time you're not wanting to use LAB is when you're growing fruit trees and you have fruits right at the end. You spray LAB on it, they're so hungry. The microbes always eat first, and they will suck the sugars out of your fruits and into your, and they'll eat it. However, there are some folks right now researching it with cannabis and towards the end, and all the way using it all the way to like harvest. And furthermore, researching whether you can harvest it and then dip it in LAB diluted 1 to 1,000. So after post-harvest to keep other molds from growing when you're starting to go through your drying and curing processes.
Interesting.
And so far the results are positive.
I mean, similar, like we've seen that with diluted hydrogen peroxide. You know, there's a number of videos about, you know, essentially that same type of thing. And so I definitely think that it could be just as effective as that. And in my opinion, probably more effective, because rather than creating a vacuum, it's occupying the space that would be there, right?
Entirely correct, because that's actually our biggest problem right now in agriculture, is we've gone to this sterilization, kill it, nuke it type of idea. And if you nuke it, you're nuking the good guys and the bad guys, and the first guys to come back into a sterile environment are typically the thugs and the guys you don't want. So, but the hydrogen peroxide is a little different in terms of it's just oxygenating the system. So you're killing any anaerobic guys. But putting a microbe in there that's the police, like to guard, you know, like, hey, guard my stuff while I'm not here. And the police are there like, all right, we'll do it.
Right. Yeah, it's a different approach. Like, you know, like, I don't remember who it was. Maybe one of you guys do. We had a guest on that made the analogy of it occupying this. Maybe it was Chris Trump. I think it was like having an apartment building, and it's occupying all of your apartments as opposed to leaving them vacant. You know, they're paying their rent on time. They're really great about it. You know, they're out competing. So there's no room for anybody to come in and squat because there's no empty space. Is kind of the way that he had that analogy. I really like that.
Yeah, and that's the thing with KNF, is you can explain it with these analogies, and it just makes so much sense to us, because, you know, we're already familiar with those things. And if you think about, you know, sterilizing and getting rid of everybody, squatters will move in. That's something we all know.
Like, right. Sure.
So there was a great study in 2016, and I think it was repeated last year, if memory serves me correctly, using lactobacillus ferment in place of bleach and chlorine-based cleaners in meat processing facilities, places that are much more susceptible to pathogenic microbes, way more than anything we deal with plants, like way more with the meat juices. And they had better pathogen control rates with the lactobacillus. It was 4 times better to use the lactobacillus than it was to use chlorine or alcohol-based things, because even with the chlorine and alcohol, there were still things that survived. And with the lactobacillus, with something consuming them, there was nothing, because something was hunting down the few things that were left. And not only that, if you have an evolutionary arms race, I want to make sure that there's an arms race to have. I want to make sure both sides are evolving, not just one side. And that's the problem we have with the antibiotics in people, you know, in that realm, with people taking like penicillin and stuff not working. It's because there hasn't been an equal arms race. One side's been allowed to evolve faster because we haven't been using probiotics. And there's a huge change moving back in that direction, even for, like they're using modified HIV virus and modified whooping cough, and there's a couple of other viruses that they're modifying and attacking cancers, where it'll attack HIV, but it's an HIV that only infects cancer cells and blows them up. And that kind of stuff, you know, turning these evil things into, you know, weapons against, you know, our biggest enemies. And I think that's kind of the future. But looking at agriculture in that same kind of way is, instead of trying to kill everything, have something eat it. It works better.
Right. I think that they use polio real well for that too, with brain tumors. And then they found that it was working real well, but it could come back after a while. But they found out that they then had to control the polio, and they used the Avastin cancer treatment and inject the other disease has killed the tumor, they had to use Avastin, which is what we use for macular degeneration.
So before radiology, they would actually give you a tropical fever disease, such as typhoid, not typhoid. I can't remember what the tropical fever is they used to use regularly, but it was discovered originally. There was a guy that had a giant goiter on his neck, and he happened to get tetanus from his bed rail while he was in the thing. He got a high fever. He maintained a high fever for 2 weeks. Well, the doctors noticed during that high fever of 2 weeks, the goiter died because those cells can't survive outside of a very particular temperature range more than a few days. And they realized cancer cells really hate a fever. So before they had radiology, this is post World War I, World War II, or pre-World War I, pre-World War II, there was two lines of thought for cancer. There was one guy working on immunotherapy with horses, where he was giving horses things and taking antibodies from that. And then there's this other guy that was giving people fever diseases, controlling the fever and maintaining a safe fever level of 102 to 104 in an adult, and running them a fever for 2 to 4 weeks and killing cancer that way. But it worked. Yeah, it's a little bit shitty for a month, but hey, I think all of us would rather have a shitty month than live with cancer. That's a pretty easy.
What do you call chemo?
But those were before radiology, those were the two lineages of research for cancer. And it's like, again, using using these immunosystem things to supercharge your immune system and recognize systems and attack them or burn them out, or otherwise, create extra antibodies in the system to further recognize these cancer cells. Even though both of them are a little bit separate, both of them had kind of the same kind of goal of increasing antibodies in the system one way or another. And it's interesting to see that kind of, again, not only going back health-wise, we're moving back in that direction, but also in how we think about soil biology as well.
We're finding out the way there's a strong tie between the way we treat plants and the human body now, and a lot of it's the same. We're going back. That's where you're at now. We're down this little rabbit hole, about the human body, but that's the whole point. Is there's so many, like I always like to tell people when they argue about minerals and stuff, I say, go look at I tell them about, like, the plant has to have rest. I'm not going to get off on that, but it has to have rest. And they argue about it. And I say, well, go look at, it's no different than, we use the same minerals in our body as the plant needs to grow properly. And if you don't believe me, go get your 1-a-day multivitamin and look at the ingredients on it. And you will find the same minerals that you would get in a nutrient formula, or that you'd create naturally or organically in that pill that you take every day. And that's the end of my statement. Segue back to you.
Well, if I can interject a little bit into the so we've been using the indigenous microorganisms in a similar way you're talking about inducing this artificial fever. So my teacher talks about there's 3 types of heats. One is like heat from the sun, and the other is like heat from the earth. So those 2 are types of fire. But there's a 3rd type of heat, and this 3rd type of heat is an infrared heat that comes from microorganisms reproducing with each other. And when you make love, it gets hot, and that's a real deal. So what you can do while you're making an IMO3 pile, which is taking the microbes you collected from the forest and putting them into some sort of bokashi, is you can actually bury your body in this pile. And what happens is it induces an artificial fever in you, and it'll raise your body temperature up above, similar to a sauna. But the difference is the sauna has the water, and a too hot sauna or too hot tub will burn you. Whereas this pile, because it's the heat from the microorganisms and it's this infrared heat, it actually is able to heat your body up in a way where it won't burn you. Where your brain sure as hell thinks, oh man, get out of here, it's burning, but it actually doesn't burn you. Although do be slightly careful, because I did sweat a whole bunch on my back and it heated up and it burned my ass a little bit. So do be somewhat careful. I'd recommend putting a towel under your butt in the pile before you bury yourself, and staying in there for about a half hour or so, and drinking a lot of fluids while you're doing it. But there's the second part of that too, is not only are you inducing an artificial fever where you're cooking out these microbes that don't live at these higher temperatures, but the second thing is that you're opening up your pores. And so as you're sweating, your pores are opening and that water's coming out, but the microbes are actually going in. And these same soil microbes that are good for your soil are almost the exact same microbes you want to have colonizing your skin. So you're actually loading yourself up with this extra layer of armor.
So would that be similar, like a mud bath? I mean, it's not the same because you're burying yourself in a pile of.
To me, it sounds like you know, I grew up in a Native American community, and we build sweat lodges in the river a lot.
Yeah.
So in Northern California, you know, it's, you know, probably your idea of a sweat lodge is, you know, is a little bit different, but basically, you know, in the middle, you build a lodge and build a fire. You get hot rocks, pour water on them to open up your pores, and you know, you know, essentially raise your body temperature just like a sauna. It's like an outdoor sauna.
You sweat out all your impurities in a sweat lodge. You sweat the point is to sweat out all your impurities, and as those impurities are leaving your body, you'll trip too if you've been drinking. And I'm telling you, I did a sweat lodge with Vision Quest. I've done sweat lodges. I love a sweat lodge. In fact, I've been wanting to build one. I need to get off my butt now that you mention it. But the whole point was to lead you to, for all the impurities to leave your body, and it's an extraordinary.
Then you're supposed to swim in the river. You know, like when you get out, you're supposed to dive in the river. And
right. You have a doorman that takes care of everything. You're not leaving in there because people can pass out. So people out there, if you're going to try a sweat lodge, be very careful. Make sure you got a doorman. He'll be the one pouring onto the rocks. He's the one to make sure that anybody that gets in danger can be drug out into the air.
Yeah, think of it just like tripping. You need a trip sitter. You need someone that's like staying outside, not getting too hot, that can just check in on everybody, not passing out. You know, it's the same kind of deal. Like it is a dangerous situation. If someone were to black out inside the sweat lodge, you could have a bad time. But as long as at least one person there isn't drinking, you're good.
You know, if you're looking to hallucinate, there's better options than dehydration.
Yeah,
so like
much more fun options.
Balls than
less headache involved.
Well,
there's better ways to do it, but for the cleansing aspect of it, you know, I do feel it's very healthy, and you know, you don't have to go on a vision quest to enjoy a sweat lodge by any means. So it's but you know, I feel like it's that same concept, opening up your pores and allowing that exchange. And in that case, you know, we're really, you know, harvesting, you know, all the limbs and stuff from the local area anyway. So, you know, I'm sure there's, you know, a significant amount of microbiology in the river also, you know, so you have that same exchange, you know, opening up your pores and getting into the river and having that exchange as well. So, you know, I like finding those parallels in, you know, to sort of, you know, like you talked about, have the science back up what old timers say and what they do. Because, you know, obviously, I think that you do need both schools. Like, I do think you need you know, you said East and West. I sort of think of it as old and new, I guess, just because of where I'm at, and because we have a lot of, obviously, Native Americans are very traditional and have, you know, very specific ways to do things, and you know, I feel like KNF is kind of in that same vibe where you get really, you know, traditionalist methods and stuff, and but I do think that if you trust that, you know, what they're doing is working, and you use the tech to reverse engineer why it's working, then everybody gets smarter. So I really like your approach on that. I feel like that's pretty cool, Drake. Double thumbs up.
Thank you.
Have you used any lactobacillus for like plant protein isolation or anything like that?
No, I mean, I haven't sliced and diced it that way. Yeah.
No, so a lot of people out there are maybe a little newer and aren't familiar with lactobacillus ferment. Do you have maybe like a basic how-to? I know, I'm sure you have some stuff on your website and stuff like that, but do you have maybe like a basic how people would make labs? They're not particularly difficult. I know I have my stuff that we talked about on the show a little bit, but is there do you have maybe something a little bit different that you like to do, or any tips or tricks, or anything in particular that you do differently?
Well, what I would say about the Korean natural farming recipe that makes it maybe slightly different than others is that the idea is that we're trying to get really broad family lactobacillus, because it's a huge family, and you know, just like, you know, someone in your family has some skill that you don't, the more family members you can get involved, the better. And so the method is basically to put starchy water out in a shallow kind of pan, where you're not getting it in direct sunlight, but you want a breeze going through. So not in a cabinet, and, you know, not where it's going to get direct sunlight, but what that's going to act as is like a runway, and all the bacteria everywhere is going to land in there. So not just LAB, but all kinds of bacteria is going to land in there. But at room temperature, the LAB grows faster than the rest of the bacteria. So the LAB is at first going to outcompete the other guys in the very beginning. So at about, it depends, 20, I've done it in as short as like 6 hours, but up to like 36 hours, you're going to have nice, good bacteria, and the LAB is going to be predominant. So this gets you your broad family, but it also gets you everything. So the second step is then to pour that into milk. And it's about 1 part of the starch water you've collected the microbes to about 10 parts milk. And you don't have to be super precise. You're just inoculating it. And what happens in this second step is all the bacteria that was breeding on this starch that was happy is now really pissed, because only lactobacillus in a few other things can break down the lactose sugar, which is a mirror image of a different type of sugar. And so what happens in this step is it's almost like a purification, where you're just isolating this broad family you've collected. And then of course that separates into the curd and the whey. And then the next step is after, and that takes, you know, it depends on temperature, but that takes anywhere from 48 hours about to 60 hours or so, maybe even longer if it was really cold out. But then I pour it through a t-shirt, because I don't want any of the fats. I don't want any of that cheese stuff to go through. And pouring it through a really fine t-shirt type filter, not cheesecloth. Cheesecloth will have crap and curd still floating in there. But a t-shirt will strain most of that stuff out. And then I mix it with equal parts of brown sugar. You can also use molasses, but molasses isn't as shelf stable because there's more moisture in there. But the brown sugar, what it does is it's a preservation technique where every water molecule is bound with a sugar molecule, and that's called supersaturation. And when that happens, it really arrests fermentation. It doesn't mean it stops it or whatever, it's just like under arrest. So it's significantly detained from what it would be doing. And that then gives you preservation at room temperature to a degree for 3 months to, I've had batches for years and they still taste like LAB. Or you can throw that in the fridge and that'll last, you know, at least a year in the fridge. And so that's what I would say about the difference of the KNF method. And I was actually, I just refreshed myself on the book before I got on this call. And part of the KNF methodology also is that during the milk step, I see a lot of guys, they'll sometimes use a airlock, and that's fine. You can totally do that because lactic acid bacteria will work in an anaerobic environment. But he mentions in the book that he's actually trying to get ones that are a little bit more adapted to aerobic and anaerobic environments. In your broader family, by having that breathable lid on your milk while it's separating, actually kind of helps that anaerobic aerobic relationship.
So let me just drop something that I've had positive experimentation on. Maybe I shouldn't, but I'm gonna share it. Have you tried keeping it in the airlock but circulating it heavily? No, I actually try not to disturb mine because it seems to separate faster for me. But I've never intentionally tried to circulate or stir it. That also works extremely well. They love the agitation or whatever other things that happen because of that. But as long as you cut the oxygen down, you can use it to limit significantly the pathogens.
Wow, that's awesome! Thanks, man.
Yeah, I don't mind sharing that one. Again, I'm being relatively vague. I'm not getting anything. We have some really advanced KNF stuff that we've taken that is kind of built off of some of the lactobacillus stuff and used it specific strains of microbes or isolated chains of microbes to isolate plant proteins. Not necessarily lactobacillus, a couple of other like fermented, even some anaerobic and not anaerobic, but just in that direction. And it's amazing to see how some of these microbes and microbe chains can really open up whole new doors for people and depending on what you're using and doing and really open new gateways for people to think about KNF. KNF is a tool that can unlock whole new portals for people if they realize how to use it properly and how to use it synergistically with all the other knowledge that people have built up, like Dr. Ingham or Dr. Resch, use it synergetically with the stuff that they've built, and people even before them, and you use that in conjunction with your traditional knowledge, and you'll get even better results. And that's kind of the thing that's kind of a lot of people kind of gloss over, is like, it's not that you do KNF over other stuff. You use it in conjunction because it unlocks all of this other bioavailability of all these nutrients. Like KNF takes something that's not nutrient available and makes it nutrient available for your plants. And it's one of the reasons why it's great for aquaponics in specific, because I can further unlock that, because we already run at lower nutrient values than you normally would, because we are relying more on microbes, that we can actually really crank that and maximize that by hybridizing it with KNF. And some of the work that I've worked with, along with, I want a big shout out to Joe Pate they did a lot of work over at Kentucky State and their research over there, and Charlie Schultz, who actually built that initial research lab. So big shout out to him, and thank you to him as well. So.
Yeah, that is awesome. Yeah, I mean, I know LAB helps and is just, it's a supporting micro. I'm glad you're extending the tech, man, and going even further, because this is, yeah, like I think we are just in the, the infant, like we're not even in the sperm hasn't even hit the egg in terms of how this thing is, in terms of where we're going to go in biological farming.
Well, think about it this way, okay? So this is how I always keep in the back of my mind for aquaponics, and the level of like closed loopness that I'm always like trying to maintain in the back of my brain. So imagine if I'm like a guy going to Mars, and I have like all these minerals on Mars that are not bioavailable, but I need to bring the right microbes and the ability to sustain said microbes with biological chains that can feed off of each other. So if I bring fish and water and plants and those mineral inputs from there and the microbes in jars that are stabilized, now I can build an entire chain. Now we can build an ecosystem there. Now we're cranking. Now, if that were to been let out into the atmosphere, now maybe we can change the atmosphere. Like, if we're going to ever terraform, we're never going to do it by dropping nukes on the poles and stupid. Like, I love Elon Musk, but that's a stupid fucking idea. We need to do this via microbes, the way that the Earth changed. The Earth changed from an anaerobic to an aerobic atmosphere in 150 million years. Okay? And astronomic time, that's a blink of an eye. Why? Because of cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria created enough oxygen for all of us to further populate the planet. That's why you and I are having this conversation right now. It's like the cyanobacteria, that red slime you get in your reef tank if you keep coral. That's a problem in a reef tank. That's the reason why we're talking to each other right now. That's how we all evolved to be terrestrial beings. They spawned the first animal group that later on became the first multicellular organisms. The reason that's why we're talking. So it's wonderful how evolution and all this stuff works. But that's how I was thinking in my brain. And we actually participated. I'm lucky enough to be involved with Ken at Ouroboros Farms, if you guys aren't familiar with them. And we participated in a NASA study, and they actually did a study of over 50 different aquaponics farms, and none of them had the same microbiology and the same microbiological food web in terms of how they process nutrients across all of them. They did DNA tests to evaluate all of them, because they wanted to figure out which microbes could we send to Mars. We need to figure out what this aquatic food chain is, because that's the most efficient for us to produce food. So how do we do that? So that's how I think the further evolution of both like soil microbial and organic hydroponics is what microbe chains working synergetically make the best food web for aquatic environments, because no one's even attempted that at all. And that's one of the beauties of KNF, is because it is all liquid based. It kind of helps move us forward in a huge way with a bunch of research that was missing in that puzzle of aquaponics being a completely, kind of moving the chemistry from where it was to a giant leap forward, and further breaking down the bioavailability of a lot of these nutrients. And I've noticed even things like something that is far removed as mammoth pea. I'm sure you're familiar with mammoth pea being a phosphorus chelating microbe, and even that is simply figuring out that microbial chain and introducing it to an aquaponics environment. It will live in your system for a very long time and continue to breed and loves to feed on the different phosphorus sources in an aquaponic system. It'll unlock up to 20% more phosphorus in an aquaponic system. And we talk about it all the time. We've had Colin Bell on the show. He's talked about the science. Like, it's great. But
Yeah,
that to me is the future of all of this research for both organic hydroponics, soil, and aquaponics. We're all on the same team, and all of the research is going to move all of us forward and further reduce the amount of nutrients that will run off into rivers. It's fine if microbes run off into rivers and stuff like that, because it doesn't increase, there's no more phosphorus going into the system other than what's already in the system. You're not, you know what I mean? Like you're not unbalancing things anymore. It's a much safer way to do things without fucking with the environment and have it causing, red tide and all this other fucked up shit that we're causing, because a lot of these microbes, if they're outside of their environment, don't live very long. So the moment they're not where they're supposed to be, they're fine. They control themselves. We don't have to worry about it. So that's the reason why we need to move all of these different technologies, be it soil, organic hydro, or aquaponics, forward kind of as one and stop fighting each other, which has been a frustration of mine, because you have these soil Nazis that are like, if it's not soil, it's not organic. And I'm like, tell me an aquatic food environment's not organic. It's stupid.
I think you talked about evolution. I'll just inject something real quick. You were talking about evolution, and actually aquaponics has evolved to use the dual root zone, and that's what's led you to all this research. And the fact that at Ouroboros, you guys are a teaching farm. So, that's, you've been so fortunate to be out there. I agree. And it's really broadening. We're all having the same ideas though. Wow, you can make a ferment, oh man. And then your brain starts popping off. And that's all I
think that when you start, considering, like the diversity of an aquaponic system making such a large difference in its, production or the types of plants that it can grow. There was a couple of studies. I think one of the ones they had at Kentucky was when we had him on, I don't remember his name, but when we had the guy on from Kentucky State University, they were talking about it. The diversity increasing over time, even to the point where I think they were 2 years into testing or something like that, and they were still seeing an increase in diversity, even in an isolated system. And, we were touching on this before too, with outdoor aquaponic systems that are exposed to the environment, getting the effects of indigenous microorganisms over time. So an outdoor system, like for instance, the one in my backyard, produces, in my opinion, much more fruit for the amount of input that it gives than like my indoor system. And part of that, I feel like I attribute to, in my anecdotal experience, of course, but I attribute to the indigenous microorganisms that have essentially incorporated themselves into that system over the 3.5 years that it's been out there. So I do think that having an outdoor system exposed to those and increasing the diversity faster is going to be important, especially for people who are considering doing indoor systems and understanding the need to mimic other inputs, like with KNF, for instance, to where you can capture and inoculate indoor systems with them. I think you would see a dramatic increase in all the things that you want to see an increase in, yield, plant health, decrease in bugs, decrease in pathogens and root issues, like all of those things, I think can be balanced from a microbiology standpoint, as opposed to all the traditional ways, which has been, just like we talked about earlier, sterilize, wipe out, isolate, kill everything, hope your plant lives long enough to be able to get fruit out of it, while you're constantly killing off everything that lives in the root zone and trying to feed it artificial food the entire time. So I feel like shaping it around that context of it is how KNF can really unlock different portions of the indoor growth and market that's really, I guess, also problematic for a lot of people when they're trying to produce on a commercial scale. I don't feel like they've quite put all the dots together to make that happen, because their approach is completely wrong. You have, so many indoor gardens that get infestations that they can't get rid of. They have root problems that they can't explain. They throw out their soil every 2 years and buy it again. Like, there's so many things wrong with the approach and methods that they go through to get it, that even their arguments, it becomes difficult to sort of get them to understand how completely different it would be if you approach things just from nurturing your existing microbiology instead of killing it. Like, just starting there and heading in that direction, like, I feel like once people start listening and you can get them on that track, they start seeing those benefits, and then it's just like, it's like a snowball effect, and they'll just keep rolling with it, and it generally tends to work out. But I do think that that approach really just has to stop. Like, it's just not successful. It's sort of like the drug war. We've pumped enough into it. We should have seen progress by now. We're clearly not going to be able to stop people from doing drugs. So in the same way that we're not going to be able to stop indoor gardens from getting infested and not producing the way that you project them to, because of things that you're not calculating. So I think that when you allow the microbiology to do so much more of the work, there's way less calculations to do, and you can keep them healthy and inoculated really pretty easy through KNF. I don't feel like there's anything that's like super labor intensive, and plenty of people have put out, ways and shown ways of doing things on a commercial scale. Like, Chris Trump's videos are a great example of how you can, or Drake's videos are a great example of how you can do larger scale projects, and scale these ideas that have typically been, used on smaller organic farms, like more of your craft farms. And I think if we're going to have a commercial market, we should have a good one, so we should take those technology and the experience from those craft farmers and at least get good product out of it. Healthier
so Drake, are you involved? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought Drake, are you involved in, since Marty kind of hit on the Chris Trump and the big farms, are you involved in a big farm? I mean, we didn't ask you or talk about that, did we? Or what exactly are you your status as far as farmer or whatever?
Farming in Hawaii is very, very difficult, just based on land value, and they're just, there's not many farmers here just in general. So largely what I have here is kind of a model farm. I went to Korea, I saw it, I mimic it, I replicate it. Largely what I do is, I guess people would call it subsistence, but I call it, just living off the land. So I grow about 90% of what I eat, and I keep pigs, chickens, and I'm into that whole aspect of it too.
Oh, good. And so how many acres?
Our land here is 26 acres.
Oh, that's very, yeah, you could subsist off of 26 acres, I imagine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Help some other people subsist.
Yeah, we actually have been.
So what kind of crops do you grow in particular?
I got a lot of what they call traditional Hawaiian crops. So I like to grow what grows easy, and grow it well. So I got bananas, cassava, which is tapioca. I grow avocados, all kinds of fruit trees. I just pulled up some arrowroot the other day. Tea leaf. Growing a bunch of kind of food foresty type stuff. Got a bunch of nitrogen fixers out there. I'm planting a bunch of sugarcane right now. Actually, I'm thinking that sugar may be one of the crops that, it led Hawaii to riches in the past, and I think with KNF it can lead us to the riches again in the future. As we shift from a salt-based farming economy back to a sugar-based farming economy, I kind of see the writing on the wall that having sugar is going to be one of the more important things we can access. And if you can have organic sugar, 100% KNF all the way through, and you know it was biologically grown, that's, you know, that's going to be the top shelf product. So I've been leaning a lot more towards that and diversifying just that way.
I never clarified it like that. Salt versus sugar based. I like that. Just that simple phrase right there. You know, I never thought of it exactly like that. That gives you a whole new perspective on it. You know, for us, because I'm just getting started in aquaponics and stuff with these guys since I've been on the show with them for a couple years. But it's been amazing. And then we have a panelist that hadn't been here for a while because he's been busy. But you know, he doesn't follow all KNF exactly, but he's organic and uses a lot of KNF methods and the ferments, and that got me all excited about being able to do that in pretty much any medium you want or any kind of grow system you want. I figure you could use blueberry ferments and stuff like that to, you know. So, and I got blackberries. I can't even stop them from growing on my. I got 2.25 acres, and it's covered with blackberries. So I've got a lot of nutrients out there. So, and silica too, right, Steve? What do you think about silica?
I'm the preacher of silica when it comes to aquaponics.
I've been trading so I grow fruits off the hook, like bananas, guavas, papayas. I can grow those like crazy all day. It's a lot harder for people in the States to grow those things. So what I've been doing is I've actually been doing FPJ exchanges, and I just got a really sweet FPJ. I got a horsetail FPJ from a student I taught up in Oregon, Tom Murphy, or Humphrey is his name. Oh man, unreal. So I'm you know, silica, you know, I can get bamboo and other sources here, but that horsetail is off the hook, man.
There's tons of horsetail. They grow everywhere around here. So
the only tropical thing I found in Jamaica that came close to horsetail, because horsetail will not grow in the tropics unless someone's found a variety that will, in which case I would love to have your babies, is that as rice husk. You can make a fermented rice husk lab that works pretty well for silica in the tropics only. Kind of.
Interesting.
I even use some chopped horsetail as filler in soil, kind of like you would corn husks or, you know, whatever generally you use in your mix or compost or whatever, and just chopped it up and used it, mixed it right in with the soil as like aeration, and worked great. Had no issues. Everything just grew beautiful tomatoes, delicious spaghetti sauce.
Yeah. What do you chop it with? I mean, doesn't it make the scissors dull? It's kind of, yeah, isn't it? It's real gritty, isn't it?
Well, it really depends on the variety. And the one over here, it's at least it grows here. I go down. I mean, it grows everywhere around here, but I always pick it up when I go visit my dad, because down there on the ranch, there's just a huge patch of it, and it grows in, like, on the side of the creek bed where it floods and then recedes throughout the summertime. So it floods in the wintertime on the edge of the banks. It builds up, you know, this really good silt, and the horsetail just grows like crazy through there every year. And it's not really difficult to cut at all. It's very thin walled, almost like a straw. You could, it's so hollow also, you could like cut it like a tube, poke a hole through it, use it as a straw. But it's very easy to chop up. So I just, I usually, you know, get like a garbage bag full, and then I'll pull some out, put it in a 5-gallon bucket, and just use like you know, like garden shears, you know, just like you would use to trim your hedges or something like that. And
it's a reed, actually. It's a reed is what it is.
It's a reed, yeah. Yeah, it definitely gets thicker at different times of the year. It's kind of a weird plant because it has a couple different phases. It's like half plant, and I think it releases spores, I think, or something strange like that. I don't know, Steve might know.
Horsetail, you talking about?
What?
You talking about horsetail?
Horsetail, yeah.
So horsetail is actually, it grows similar to, think of it like a, what's the name of that plant? Irises. You know, irises have like a big tuber, and they flower once a year, and then they have lots of greenery in between. And they have these big giant tuber networks underground. So horsetail is really similar. It creates these giant tuber networks where it's like a vine, almost like mint, but much, much thicker. And that's where they store a lot of nutrients, and they'll shoot shoots up anywhere along that. And it can grow in water. It needs to have like a water source, but it can grow in or out of water. It's a really good bioaccumulator, so you have to be careful. You do not want to harvest it near a road or near a mine or someplace that has other heavy metals. You need to make sure you harvest it from a clean source. Otherwise, it will accumulate things you do not want in your ferments. That's something that people often forget to leave in their instructions for horsetail in particular. But horsetail is great because it has lots and lots and lots of salicylic acid. So it has lots of bioavailable silica. So all you need to do is ferment that in some lactobacillus. If you're super in a pinch, you can go to the local grocery store, maybe get 2 to 4 gallons of milk. Hit up your Sam's Club or your Walmart, get the cheapest whole milk you can get, and then take that and then go to your yogurt aisle and find the kefir section and get a couple of things of kefir. Like if you're seriously are like bare budget bones, like you ain't got shit for money, go to Walmart, get some milk, get some kefir from the health food section in Walmart or wherever your cheapest area is. Pour that in the milk, add your silica, your horsetail you found in the creek, but relatively far away from a local mine or road, or local dump, or someplace you feel comfortable, or even if you just want to do some local labs and you're just bare bones doing lactobacillus ferment. That's your bare bones lactobacillus ferment recipe. At least the cheapest. Like I ain't got shit for money. Like I got $10 or $20 to spend on nutrients for my plants. That's the cheapest way that I found in terms of just getting your colony going, because sometimes some of these things can get expensive. I'd love to hear your what your opinion is on like a bare bones labs, or maybe not even bare bones. Like what is your go-to lactobacillus? How would you facilitate? But that's been the cheapest, like real ultra quick. I need this to work in a couple days, kind of. I got $20 in my pocket kind of recipe.
Well, you're talking to me. Like I mean, I think the starch water too. I mean, I hear that commercial starter one. I think with a commercial starter, you're gonna limit your family in terms of how big it is, but it's any yogurt, any of that juice on the top, that is whey. That's lactobacillus. I mean the starch water also. So Asian women, the classic thing used to be you wash your rice and you take that starchy water and you just leave it outside, and the next morning they would wash their face with it. And it turns out just in that starchy water, the lactobacillus count is off the hook. So just even starting with starchy water that you've exposed to the air is a pretty darn good inoculum. The only thing is you want to make sure it smells kind of sweet or like sourdough. You don't want it if it smells like shit or like a horse's ass. Like that don't use that. Like that's not going to work. But the sweet stuff, man, it's lactobacillus. So it should actually, in any healthy environment in the Milky Way, you should have 30% lactobacillus. So it's almost omnipresent around us.
You're talking about doing this in a tray. Like they would take it and put it like in a tray, like you talked about earlier, an open tray outside.
Yeah, just a bowl outside their house, and in the morning they'd wash their face with it. And that's like we always think, oh, Asians are younger, man. Maybe they just have more lacto than us.
I've never heard Milky Way described as anything other than the galaxy. That is absolutely I'm sorry, I just was tripping on that for a minute. But you're absolutely right, though. It's really interesting. I know Tommy, one of the guys that works for our company, is definitely a lactobacillus evangelical. I guess is probably
Fanatic.
He hands out colonies. He mails them to people. He puts it on their skin. He puts it in their bodies. He puts weed in it sometimes. Like he does all kinds of shit to it. Whatever he needs to do to get people to take it, he puts flavoring in it. Like doesn't get whatever it is just to get it in you to take it the first time. Like that's whatever he'll do. Like that's Tommy.
My favorite is when politicians or something will come over to check out my farm. Man, I always dose them. I'm like, these guys, they need this stuff.
right? Makes totally changes their frame of mind for sure.
How can you tell? What are the signs of someone who totally needs a lactobacillus dose?
Well, you know, so I've been coating myself in these microbes since I got turned on to it, and I just noticed people that drink kombucha and stuff, their whole face and everything changes, and the more I get these microbes, I don't have any BO. Like I can sweat, I can work hard, I had no BO, and I think it helps you think clear. You know, you get the shit out of your gut, your whole gut system starts functioning better, and I think it affects your mind, man. So.
Well, they've been doing a lot of research with it in regards to like PTSD, depression, different things like that. So, you know, I don't think you're far off.
Well, I think it's about cleansing your body. If your body's cleansed, then your mind will be cleansed.
Well, oh man, never mind. There's more to the chemistry of this that I cannot talk about because of NDAs right now.
Cool.
This sounds good, man. I'm looking forward to the research.
Way to go.
That's all I'll say right now. That's all I'm allowed to say legally.
Well, thanks for not sharing.
Myself into like a lot of legal trouble. There's more truth to the statement that was just made than you guys could possibly understand, and the chemistry will be relevant to you guys the next couple of months legally.
Well, it would be possible if you just tell us, but.
So I use it in my laundry as well, just as a deodorant, and I just pour it in. I you know, in I don't even use laundry soap. I make my own soap, but just you know, potassium hydroxide and some oil, and heat that up, make my own soap, and then I use lactobacillus. I store them separately because the lacto will break down my soap if I store them together. But that's what I've been washing my laundry with. And
I was just about to ask, how does the lacto tolerate the high pH of the hydroxide?
I mix them in as I turn the laundry on, the water's coming in, and that's when I add it.
Oh, okay. It's not like
so you mix them like part A and part B in the water.
It's like I never heard anyone store labs at a high pH, which was
like calcium.
Made me think for a second.
No, they would decompose each other. It wouldn't work. But I have 2 bottles above my laundry machine, and I dump both those in. You know, the soap helps to get the suds going and gets out a little bit of the dirt, and the LAB just eats everything. And then when I put my shirt on, I'm pre-inoculated. Pretty awesome.
What kind of oil do you use, Eric?
I'm using canola oil, but if I was a baller, I'd probably be using coconut oil.
Okay, we're big fans of coconut oil,
Yeah, totally.
Coconut oil.
But to put coconut oil into my laundry machine, I'm like, I think I'll put this in my frying pan instead, you know?
Yeah, I got you. So canola is a less expensive alternative to do your wash with.
Yeah.
Your body's coconut oil, washing canola oil.
Okay. Yes.
Wash the car. You wash your car with the stuff too.
Well, you know what's actually interesting about coconuts is the coconut water, and inside the coconut there's actually lactobacillus. That's what keeps the coconut fresh. That's what's in it. So if you're using fresh, like unpasteurized, unheated coconut oil, you're actually getting natural lactobacillus.
Wow, nice.
That's an interesting little tidbit there.
What does that pass through the same for coconut water?
It all depends. If someone pasteurized it, probably not. But it's in
like if I got a coconut
and you open it, that's lactobacillus in there, you know. And it's also what honeybees use when a honeybee is making its filling its cell up with sugar. It puts lactobacillus in there before it seals the top with wax, so that it can keep it fresh as it's dehydrating it. And so this, and we know honey is the most stable thing on the planet. You can find it thousands of years, and it's lactobacillus, man.
That's great.
It's not actually the sugar ratio; it's the labs. That's really that's really cool. That's something I hadn't heard before. It's really interesting.
I'm not going to say it's entirely not it's the sugar ratio. So they're super saturating it by concentrating the sugar and dehydrating it by flapping their wings over it. Yeah. They are doing essentially what we are doing when we go to preserve lactobacillus, which is pouring in equal volume of sugar. So they're doing the very similar process in terms of preservation. So I would say it's a combo. It's super saturation in terms of reducing the moisture content, and it's lactobacillus.
That's really cool. So having a probiotic on top of that makes a hell of a lot of sense. That's really interesting. That's so cool. That's something I hadn't heard of before. I even have bees that are 75 feet from me as we speak. So it's a whole
Well, that basically explains why coconut oil is so good for you too. I mean, that's pretty interesting. That was really interesting. So you bust a coconut open, and the coconut milk is lactobacillus.
Yeah, it has high quantities of it. You know, yeah.
Wow, that is awesome.
So someone asked, is fractionated coconut oil might be okay? So fractionated coconut oil probably has been heated. That's what the fractionated means. It's been fractioned off. Unless you...
Well, pure.
We actually had a question for you specifically earlier in the show. Does it make a harvest sense from IMO or to harvest IMO under wild Saskatoon berries from my cultivated Saskatoon berries?
Yeah. So getting it from an environment where it's already going, you're kind of building upon. But I like the thread that you guys were headed down, where you're talking about one microbe, then getting the next one, getting the next one, getting the next one. So you wanna start with a good inoculum. But if you heard what I said when I was talking about collecting the IMO, I'm actually talking about collecting like a fractal portion of the IMO. So you're setting a collection box in that area and you're collecting this. But what a fractal is a self-repeating pattern based on the scale. So if you zoom in and you keep zooming in on a fractal, you'll get more and more detail until you get down to maybe a base case, assuming that even exists in our universe. But these fractals, what that means is that as you zoom out, it's like a kernel that can build itself. And it's like almost like a self-replicating pattern. And so if you go and you start to collect that fractal in one that's already, towards that shape, you're better off. But again, it's all about this diversity. It's all about how this fractal pattern will expand out based on its environment, what foods you're feeding, and how those microbes, and then the diversity that happen. And that's another reason for the IMO pile, is as you're turning it, you're getting the outer side is a bit cooler than the inside, and you're mixing it, and you're getting more and more diversity, and you're expanding this fractal of goodness.
Awesome. Marty, did you want to let everybody know what your YouTube channel is before you take off? I know you got to run.
Oh yeah, I gotta take off. It's youtube.com/apmeds, or you can just search AP Meds on YouTube or on Patreon, either one. And I haven't put out much recently. A little frustrated with YouTube, but I have a number of documented grows on there. All the pictures you see up here on the slideshow I've been running have all been documented on there, so you're free to go on there and check them out. And yeah, hit me up if you guys have any questions, and I'll see you guys next week.
Cool.
Drake, nice to meet you, and great guest. Appreciate everything, and have a good night.
Thanks.
See you next week.
Yeah, thank you.
So what I like to tell people too, and to further build on what you're saying, is it's more about building a good base and then maintaining diversity and balance. And as long as you can do those two things, everything will always take care of itself. One of the best things I've noticed for lactobacillus in particular is for root rot. I have never seen a system where I have seen root rot or pythium and then put lactobacillus in it, and within 72 hours, those plants don't go from limp to back to at least half-assed looking like they're recovering, at bare minimum. I'm talking most of the time they bounce, the leaves suddenly reinflate the way that, almost as if they didn't have root rot. It's incredible to see how a simple introduction of a microorganism can make such a catastrophic difference for the better. I love to say catastrophe for the positive, or try to use those kind of like heavy emotional words, but like in a positive context, because it's amazing how quickly plants can recover when they're given the proper microbial things via the root system or foliarly, depending on the application.
That's why I explained the LAB as the KNF police or the KNF emergency workers. when that's happening, you know, you got an emergency. There's people trapped in a mine. The roots can't get oxygen. They're dying off, and subsequently pathogens are going. But heck, man, bring in the KNF emergency workers. You know, the KNF police, water them into that root zone. They'll go into they'll run into the burning building to go save the kittens, you know, and then that's their job.
Wow. I'm going to have to start a little bed and do a little KNF thing, because I'm hearing things that I teach on a forum, and, you know, I always get in fact, yesterday I was reading something where a guy was having a problem with root rot and all like that, stuff like that. And it's just simple that you don't think about that, you know, and then all of a sudden, you know, Steve decides to tell us how he's seen plants come back, you know, by introducing labs, you know, and it just keeps going on and on. I mean, what can't labs be used for? Is that, you know, the question now, I think, you know.
Well, like I said, the only time you don't want to use it is if you're growing fruit. Like if I had a rack of bananas that was ripe and I sprayed it on, that it would taste like cardboard.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, yeah.
And the other place you don't want to use labs, is just to be careful, is with lab, make sure you're supplying food. Just like police. Like if you put police out and you don't pay them enough, they will hustle the local folks for all that money, and they will take it. So as long as you're applying, you know, like a fermented plant juice or some sort of food with your police, and you're giving them their due wages, man, they're going to be great for you.
That's cool. Thank you. Yeah, that's a good clarification too. I understood it, so I could explain it to somebody else. So that's what it is with me sometimes. Yeah, yeah. So you have to have the labs, and you have your blackberry ferment, and there's your food, is what you're saying, or whatever ferment you might make. You know, what plant you might use. Like, you know, BrayneGro did pumpkin last year. You know, he was doing the labs and did pumpkin, grew some pumpkins, and he said he was having great results. But then he's been off the show for a while, so we really don't know. One day we'll get him back on here and find out just how good everything did work out. But, you know, we've talked a lot about that, because we've had so many different people on that are getting into the KNF, or at least using parts of it, you know, to evolve their way of growing. You know, they, you know, not all necessarily doing a straight KNF, but like I could just see it in all kinds of, you know, applications, and even as small as how easy it would be if you just had a bunch of big pots that you were growing vegetables in. You know, you should be able to do this method. And Marty brought up Chris Trump earlier, and I'm sure you know Chris. But I love the story he was telling about. Well, one time I knew this guy was doing conventional farming, and it was just dead. The soil was just, everything was dead, and he was going to deep till it and go do all that and amend it with salts and stuff. And Chris talked him into doing KNF, and he said it took 3 years of keeping up with it, and then now all they do is water it. The soil and the terra is so, everything in the subculture, everything is so great that they don't have to do anything but just the maintenance, like the maintenance, whatever, you know, machinery, or, you know, whatever they've got, the mechanical.
Yeah. We had another guy too. We were at the last cannabis conference I was at, and the guy was red-blooded from Texas, as red as you can be, like,
oh yeah,
full-blooded Texas Republican, you know, make America great again. Never would have thought he would have ever been in a weed conference, and he had seen some Korean natural farming video and was like, this is more sustainable and better for my land than anything else I've ever seen. I need to listen to these stoners and come down and listen to them and get my stuff together. And I have his email. At some point we are going to get him on the show, but now the guys are in 80,000 acres somewhere up in Montana after seeing
I was going to say he wasn't from Texas, he was from Montana.
And me and Tommy went and talked about him the right after that conference, and it was really interesting to hear about this guy up in Montana. You know, he said he had tried it on, I forget how many, a couple hundred acres, and his cows on that acreage produced, it was like 20% more calves, and the mortality rate was like 5% compared to whatever, you know, the other one was. And like, it made the health of the calves better. It made the land healthier. It made it like everything up the entire food chain. It wasn't just the grass. It was the cows and the grass. and the weasels and like all the other different shit in the food chain. Like it wasn't just that one thing, and that's the thing that I think people need to understand with KNF is that you're not just building on one phototropic layer. You're building on a whole bunch of them. You know, a whole bunch of different layers in the food chain that you're supplying and benefiting and getting increased nutrient uptake. It's the mammals and the fish and the worms and the crustaceans and the bacteria and all the different things in the chain, not just one. And that's the reason why this is much better for large scale commercial. You know, if we're going to treat the way that we've treated things with the salt ways, if we treated it this way, we would have to use about 10% of the salts that we do now for supplementation for what the plants actually burn up. And 2, we could probably not have to do a shit for 50 or 60 years because we've already dumped so goddamn much into the ground that's not bioavailable, that's just sitting there burning their shit out of the plants and turning into non-bioavailable forms that harm the plants and then make the plants more susceptible to insects and molds and all this other bullshit that we have to then go spend more money on. And, you know, we don't want to do that. So we're only just throwing money into a furnace instead of, you know, helping each other out and saving each other on money. And not only that, you have people like Drake and Chris and the guy in Montana. All 3 of those guys have proven that you can do this shit on 5% of the cost or 10% of the cost of a traditional farm and get way better yields. And they put out this education. And thank you for that. All of those guys that have brought Canadian natural farming to my knowledge, and you know, and it wasn't just one person, it was all the group of them, and thankfully for everybody, and the whole community has kind of come together to try to help bring people this knowledge and put it out there, because without that, how are we going to move forward? And God forbid our government collapses or internet collapses or there's an EMP or some other stupid bullshit. Those of us that know how to grow off the land will be just fine. We'll be growing the medicine, the plants, and food, and we'll be selling it to everyone that's shooting each other and acting stupid. So
you'll have to have security.
Hopefully it never comes to that, but you know, it might. You're on an island. You don't have to worry about shit.
I got a big moat.
I'm curious, but would you actually possibly, by going to the sugar method and getting away from the salt methods, would you also possibly use less water? Because the soil retain the water better?
So the theory, the practice of this, of what I talk about is the water retention. Not only is it in the microbial bodies themselves, so just like you and I are full of water, you know, and because the microbes are dying every half hour, that's water that's not going to float away. That's water that's going to be readily available, and the microbes are mostly in the root zone, so they're going to die right there, and they're going to be releasing moisture that way. But there's also this other part of the theory that as you start to create airspace in your soil, so if your soil is dead and sterile, your soil is going to collapse, and it's going to form this really hard layer that's not going to let water in there, but it's also not going to let air in there. And so as you bring this 4 to 6 inches, you know, inch to 6 inches of your land to life, what happens is air starts to penetrate. And there is a lot of air in the water, or excuse me, let me say that the other way around. There's a lot of water in the air. Yeah. There's a humidity, you know, and we have water in the air. And so what happens when the microbes create this space is they create these air tunnels. And as the water from the air penetrates down, they cool the soil. And so just like your glass of water gets water on the outside, and that's not leaking from the inside out, that's actually condensing from the humidity in the air, the same thing starts to happen in the soil. So what the microbes do is they actually create these, like, you know, just like Star Wars, where they had moisture harvesters and moisture generators. They actually do this in the soil, and they pull the moisture out of the air into the systems. So you can just grow in the desert. The key to helping this is not only inoculating with microbes and feeding them, the second key to that is also providing charcoal for them. So biochar. And just a small nug of biochar, it doesn't even need to be much. And that gives them the electrical charge that now they can start pumping this water around. And also that char acts as like a mega reservoir. And so you'll see the fungal hyphae will just plug into this piece of char. And what they're doing is they're storing nutrients, but they're also storing water in here. And so that combination of char, microbes, a little bit of food to stimulate the system, and as they build that soil depth layer, that is why you can reduce your watering costs. Because
Right.
your watering is, when you water the soil, you're mostly watering with what they call like dead water. You know, you can really get it deep into water. I love water, but it's very low oxygen content. When it rains, it's high oxygen content, and when the microbes are bringing this living water out, it's actually high oxygen content water, and that's what is also bringing oxygen into your plant roots, is your water.
Well, good. That's what I kind of thought. Not exactly like that, but I felt like we had talked about the salt. It just made sense to me that if you built this, and as you said, as your layers get deeper and deeper, it would actually not only just retain water, but the air is going to bring in. And I know about humidity. I got 90% over here. You know, I walk across the yard, I've got to change my clothes. You know,
yeah, you're swimming in it, man. That's the new thinking. That's the biological thinking of understanding how to unlock that, how to empower the microbes to be these water harvesters for us.
Yeah. I know Mr. Green Jeans loves it because he's enamored with the biochar, and you just made his day. You just explained something we've been talking about for a year.
No, I wanted to further like ask a weird question on top of that. So, are you familiar with the concept of VPD? Vapor
Like-
pressure deficit?
Oh no, I thought you were talking about Eric P. Dollard, who's an amazing dude. If you guys don't look up Eric P. Dollard if you want to trip out on electricity. That dude is off the hook. But no, what were you talking about?
VPD is vapor pressure deficit, which is how much moisture the air can hold when it's fully saturated versus how much it can hold at its current temperature and moisture rate. So
yeah. So I'm familiar with that, where it gets cool in the evening and then like the floor becomes slick.
yeah,
Right?
your
So-
temperature and humidity need to stay in sync, and if it doesn't, it can fuck up your shit. So to me, that is the key to what you just talked about. So if the VPD is off, those microbes, even at the soil layer, will not uptake that moisture layer. And if you do not have your moisture rate in the soil and even in the air to a lesser extent at the right level, those microbes cannot operate. Even and now, in particular, with something like, so we do use a method called dual root zone, where we have like a respiration in the root zone, and if that gets too dry, it's fucked. Like you have to keep it in a certain method, just like you talked about. So it kind of further supports the emphasis on VPD being so important, you know, even in that context, and why that's so, you know, you never hear any aquaponic people talk about VPD. I've never heard a single aquaponics person talk about that. Only cannabis people have I heard talk about that, or large scale commercial greenhouse people. No, the only two people talk about that. But in an outdoor environment, it's impossible to control. But in an indoor environment, it is. So.
Wow, cool.
But you could control it to a lesser extent just by maintaining the moisture level at a minimum level. You know, at the soil zones, you got misters or sprayers to keep the moisture layer, you know, at the root zone above XYZ percentage. You know, once you determined it, but just to try and further quantify what you were saying.
Righteous.
Sorry, I'm just in nerd mode today. I had a stressful first half of the day and an easy second half. So.
Brad, I love what you've been doing. Your comments into the Korean Natural Farming group, man, they're very informative. I've really been digging it.
Thanks. Yeah, I kind of tried to chop up some of the KNF stuff and try to figure out, like, okay, that we know that this method works, but like, what chains is it in this that works, and how can we like maximize the efficiency of those? You know, I do a lot of work with maximizing efficiency, and it's all started because in aquaponics, I'm restricted like all hell, because if I push something too much, I kill the fish, because their gills tend to be pretty good at uptaking nutrients or lots of other things. So I have to watch potassium. You know, that's probably in zinc are the biggest two. Other chemicals as well, but those being probably the biggest base nutrients. So you have to really be mindful of that. So trying to figure out microbial ways that I can force them into the plant that maybe don't necessarily work for the fish has kind of been what I've been aimed at, and it ends up with some of the weird solutions that I've kind of come to, and why KNF is, you know, hybridizing so well with aquaponics, and the research we're doing is so in sync.
That's amazing to me, because I mean you really do have like a canary in the mine shaft with your fish.
Yep.
So it just shows like as, you know, as we start to practice this, you know, if you get biological runoff off your farm, it's like, heck, if your fish are fine, then if my stuff spills into the ocean, it's like the fish are gonna do better in my estuary.
Exactly.
Like,
Good point.
Exactly. This is the reason why right now I'm trying to push for like a whitelist for aquaponics and aquaculture as far as inputs, because then we know that no one that's doing anything of this realm can be like held accountable for any of the bullshit going on. And we know that everyone's like best practices and being ecologically responsible, and it's easy for the end user because they have a cheat sheet. You know, make it easy to comply and everyone will comply. Like, stop making it fucking difficult. That's the problem.
so speaking of your cheat sheet, I may as well, while I'm here, plug my app. It's
Oh yeah. Please tell us. You have a wonderful app you guys have built.
So as a computer programmer, I thought, you know, heck, man, I got this Excel sheet, and I'm calculating off this, or I got some table that I printed, and it's like, man, I could just write an app for Android and iPhone. And so I sat down and I wrote it, and it's basically a solution calculator. So you plug in how many gallons you want to work with, and you then hit enter, and it tells you exactly the milliliters to dilute. And the cool thing for me about the app is that although I just lost my Android key, I was searching all over on the internet or on my computer for it, but I can push updates. So unlike a traditional textbook where you got to go buy the new edition, once you've bought my app, I actually can push updates, and I can put the latest information into it and deliver it. And the global network of this, where it's like, you know, guys in the third world and like Hawaii have access to these apps, and almost everybody these days has a smartphone. And so I figured, well, you know, this is a great way to reach out and to put this technology in a way where it works for us. And so
it's cheap too. It's $4 or $5 depending on where you're buying it in the world.
Yeah, and that money really helps me. It's small amounts, but man, that's, you know, I'm headed to Korea in a couple weeks, and I've been making my living 100% off KNF, and just I used to work for the state of Hawaii teaching elementary school kids, and I decided, man, I'm gonna go full bore into, you know, making money from what I love instead of making money off taxpayers and teaching their children, which I still love to teach their children, but just not in that system. So if my boss is listening, thank you. You were great.
I had a question about your app, but it's like, I'm legally blind and I don't really use smartphones so much. So how would I be able to use it? Is there any way?
That's a great question. You can actually use most apps for cell phones on Google Chrome. You can actually use the entire store on there and then zoom it into whatever you need as far as blowing it up on a screen for someone like yourself.
Yeah.
Maybe you have another.
On my screen,
I know that I actually personally use a lot of my cell phone apps on my computer just via that interface, just because I hate fucking using my phone if I'm home. Why do I use my phone? I have a bigger screen.
Well, this is good feedback for me, knowing your use cases and knowing these things, and then that's the great part about it, is people have given me great feedback, and then I've actually integrated it in. So understanding that, you know, if you're visually impaired, hey, I could make it so it'd be super easy for you to see, you know, all these things. I just don't know, you know, if it works for me, but you know, the more feedback I get, and the better I can make it.
There you go, maybe a jumbo version, real giant.
With the big screens that I use, though, it's not so much as that I can't make it, because I can go Control plus, you know. But what I'm talking about is well, Steve kind of explained it. I was asking about the availability to somebody with a PC that has maybe Google Chrome, and then Steve said, well, you can use the apps if they're, you know, that on Google Chrome, because okay, so if that works out, I'll try it out. I'll see if I can't try it out. Well, I'm not doing any of that right now, but I'd love to look at it. I'm always into like nutrient calculators and stuff.
So for anyone that's interested, you can actually open a new tab in Google Chrome, and in the top right it'll say YouTube, or it'll say hold on a second, it'll say Google Apps. You can click that, and then one of them it will say like store or Google Play or something like that, one of the two, and then that'll take you to the store, and then you can download any app and treat it just like a cell phone. It works through the browser.
What is the app called there?
So my app is called KNF Solution Calculator.
And the link is in the description for anyone interested. They can
cool.
click there, and that'll also be in the audio format as well in the link as well, for those of you not listening and not watching YouTube right now. So,
Yeah.
what are the other common misconceptions maybe you've heard from KNF, or things maybe are common questions you've heard about KNF, or maybe you want to kind of loop around and reiterate your resources, and we'll close you out depending on how much more time you want to give us.
Yeah, I got to go feed my pigs here pretty soon, but so I would say one of the common misconceptions I think people have about KNF is that it's this purist dogma, and to a degree, my teacher he'd slap you if you're like, oh, I ferment in plastic. He'd just slap you, and so I did learn from some dogma, but I see my dad actually, he sprays Roundup around the land. Like he's from that school, and that's how he does it. And Roundup is a great chelator, and so when he combines biochar plus the IMO plus the Roundup, he grows huge stuff, because it chelates all the stuff out, it stores it in the char, and then the microbes redistribute it. I'm not advocating that as a that we should do that, but what I'm saying is that it's non-dogmatic. It's like, use what you got. You can find one component of it, and you can wean yourself into it. You can start with liquid IMO. You can start. My favorite thing is to start with FPJ, the fermented plant juice. I love turning people onto lab, because you can drink it yourself. You'll notice health benefits on your own, and it's one of the simplest things. It's really hard to mess it up. So I would say, in terms of opening our minds a little bit more to see how these components can fit in, and piecewise fitting it in. And then most of our farm equipment on a large scale is based on spraying and liquid stuff anyway. So KNF is already liquefied. So I would say that's one mistake I see people make when they start to do this, is they try to pick up the water and they try to put it in a 5-gallon backpack sprayer. They try to carry water. No, like, run it through piping, run it through some sort of pump that you can get something, use gravity to your advantage, not your disadvantage, and run these liquid things through. And I would say, one of the bigger projects I've been working on right now, I've been running the Facebook group for about 5 years or so, and I've seen a lot of the same questions come out, and they're these really good questions. But there's a system that we use in the programming world, which is called Stack Overflow. And basically, you're like, how do I add pink and blue bunnies to the left corner in Android? And it'll tell you the answer, because someone has already had that question, already asked it. And you can go through and you can search previous questions and then see answers. And then the answers are actually rated. So the most helpful answer bubbles up to the top. And the accepted answer, you can see which one the author of the question actually asked was accepted and worked for them. And so you get this way of kind of vetting through the answers. Because in the KNF group, someone will ask a question, and then there'll be this discussion thread where the good answers aren't near the top. They're just wherever throughout the thread. And then the way Facebook works, they always want you to constantly contribute to it. So that stuff gets pushed down, because they always want you to put more in there, the morons, right? So what this system does, and it's knfsupport.com, is it is a question and answer platform where largely that's where I've been spending most of my time. When people ask me a question, I put a really nice detailed answer there, because I know it's going to be recyclable, it's going to be reusable, and I can just go from there and link that back into my groups and back into the forums and things where there's these vetted answers on these really good questions. And so I've taken that same Stack Overflow program and implemented it through some software, just to provide this resource for everyone. And I believe in the open source nature of Korean natural farming. I believe that everyone, even the most heavy skeptics, have something to contribute, because I learn all the time. So I invite anyone from anywhere to contribute and build this tome of knowledge that helps us as biological farmers, as kind of these pioneers in this paradigm, to contribute, to big each other up, to find out, to sort through the cruft. Because the answers I learned just on this show, just talking with you and understanding what you guys are into today, I think I leveled up, and that's awesome. And that's what it's all about. It's all about lifting each other up, leveling up. And so I'm trying to provide those tools and you know, not just share my opinion, but give it away for us all to go. Yeah. And so
I love it. I love that.
So I've been spreading the love, the hearts, and you know, may the beneficial microbes be with you.
Is that it? So I just went over there on the apps. You got a big orange heart that says KNF. Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. And I've been using that as
That's
kind of the banner of the line on.
That was a hell of a price for that kind of tool. It's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, and I appreciate your guys' support. I appreciate spreading the word, getting it out, especially putting in the cannabis realm. I mean, the medicine, the recreational. So I went to, you see this poster behind me, this hemp poster. I went to the Hawaii Hemp Festival, or hemp conference actually, and I was blown away. You can actually make the entire Korean natural farming ingredients from hemp. You can get the sugars, you can make all the IMOs, the microbes that grow in hemp, in cannabis, this plant, are off the hook in terms of how they break down all kinds of toxins and all kinds of things. And I believe it's, to a certain degree, it's the plant, but I also believe it's the microbes that colonize that plant. And if you look at the people that are attracted to this plant in our realm, in our size, we're like the front runners. We're the free thinkers. We're the guys that are coming up with solutions. And there's solutions everywhere, but I think it kind of helps us think outside the box a little bit, to bring in these new ideas, to connect with our source, and relax and get out of our heads. So as we bring this biology, this pure nutrient source into this plant and into this herb, and then put those CBDs and THCs and all the cannabinoids and everything back into our bodies, we're only going to harbor better microbes. And I just see it. So I see this tandem knowledge, this marriage, and just, so I just want to thank you guys. You guys are the front runners on this, and it's cool. I'm glad to share what I can with you.
Well, we sure appreciate all the knowledge you shared with us tonight. That's for sure.
Really?
And the way you clarified it for beginners and stuff too, that's what was really great. Sometimes, you know, it's hard. When I first started, people would start talking IMO. Well, IMOs we picked up on pretty quick, but you know, they kept saying labs one day, and all of a sudden they were talking about labs, and I missed that show, you know, and I'm going, wait a minute, you know, does everybody in the world know what that is? So then we broke it down, and then here we are, shows. I mean, we probably talk about labs almost every show or every other show, because Steve's managed to get just extraordinary guests that are world renowned, you know, and authors, and you know, and it's pretty wild to be part of the merry-go-round, you know.
Try to make the show interesting as if I was the listener and wasn't part of the show. Just try to bring in people that'll educate me about things I don't know about in the grow realm. So it's fun. We get all kinds of great people and pull us in all different kinds of directions, and it's awesome.
I think it's kind of funny, if you really get like esoteric into this, it could be the microbes talking about themselves through us.
Yeah. Well, that's what Steve did earlier, right? With his why we're talking to each other.
Yeah, right. We're
what was it, Steve?
You and I met through a Facebook group, so it's great. I had watched your videos, but I didn't realize what your real name was versus your internet persona. And was really great to have you on finally. So thank you so much for your time. I don't want to take up any more of your evening. I want to make sure your hogs get a chance to eat before sundown. So why don't you tell people again how to find you?
You can find me on Facebook. It's Facebook/It's Gucci, ITSGUCCI. If you want to friend me there, awesome. I'm also the admin of the Korean Natural Farming group there. My personal website and blog is naturalfarminghawaii.net. And again, you can, if you want to ask me a question, I prefer the way to be asked is through knfsupport.com. And otherwise, if you put cookies out, and I may come through your chimney one night.
Awesome. And then you also have, was it KNF videos too as a reference for people?
Right, and that's my YouTube link is knfvideo.com. And actually, I may as well plug it. I got a training coming up for January or December 3rd to the 13th, and then early January, 2 of those, and you can find that on knffarm.com. So you can tell, kind of as a web developer and a web programmer, I've kind of been going on that trend, KNF something, but I got KNF Farm, KNF Support, knflove.com, and a bunch of these things. So just trying to share the word and get those out.
And where's this this teaching opportunity, this learning opportunity going to be?
It's going to be here at my my farm in Onomea in Hawaii, which is just outside of Hilo. And we actually turned our farm into a kind of a retreat learning center. So you can come, stay right on the farm, work with us side by side. And the best part is I've been spreading this knowledge, and a lot can be spread through video. And I've been putting that out for free. Like my level 1 training is free on the internet. Please check it out. But this level 2, or like level 2, it's really about competency and tuning your tongue in, your nose, your hands, your eyes, all these things that I can't do through the internet. So that's really the value coming here to train is stuff that I can't do through the internet. All the rest of the information I may as well release free. I'm not trying to like hide anything or keep anything back. I'm open sourcing this as best as I can. I just haven't figured out how to make, a smell go through the internet yet. But,
yeah.
Yeah.
Working on it.
Hopefully not, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do Korean natural farming 24/7, man. It's my life. It's my passion. We also got a trip to Korea coming up. So if you want to hit me up before October, in the next week or so, we can get you in on that. And that's a great opportunity because you get to learn with Master Lee, who's one of my teachers. And we get to go to his farm, and he's been in the thick of this with great experience. Like he has a sister model farm in Korea, and he's been living this stuff daily, just the way I have. So the experience is not just theory; it's practical know-how, and just even seeing how his farm operates and what he's doing is just, it can move you light years ahead. So, hit me up. However, I'm as open as I can be. And yeah.
That's great.
So thank you again so much for all you do to help support education for us, and both in the soil and aquaponic realms. And I would love to have you on again soon. You're welcome anytime you'd like to join us. And thanks again. Take care.
Thanks
Aloha.
a lot, Drake.
Yes. And for anyone listening, links for any of his stuff is in the description if you're listening.
I love you guys. Aloha.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, Eric.
So, Roger, how you been? You had a hurricane and all kinds of craziness going on. What's new with you?
Well, I was fortunate enough to be on the southern side, but right up the road in North Carolina, there's still a portion of I-95 that's underwater. So I doubt that there's many people in my area listening to the show, but for anybody that would like that explanation, well, actually anywhere on the eastern seaboard, for the most part, part of the reason that all your stores hadn't been restocked is because it's so hard to transport the food and the goods, because a lot of it's coming out of, believe it or not, a lot of the distributorships are in North Carolina, and some of them been devastated, but other ones are blocked off because they have to do all these long detours around areas where there's not a lot of, shortcuts. And because there's literally I-95 is underwater, a portion of it's underwater still. People in North Carolina where it got hit, they're still got about 5 or 6 feet of water. They're flooded out. It's bad. In fact, yesterday I was watching I'll just call it the crisis management team, the disaster relief team or whatever. And one of the head of the bureaus there were talking about how the river hasn't even crested yet. So the flooding, even though the hurricane's long gone now, so to speak, the flooding in North Carolina could get worse. And there's still every day flash flood warnings without any rain. There's flash flood warnings from this water that was just washed in. And it was just crazy. I mean, like I said, we got fortunate. I'm not sure. I don't even think downtown on the coast. I don't think anywhere near our coast or our area got really hurt that bad, other than maybe some erosion, which is a serious problem out at the beach. But I think Myrtle Beach probably got hit. If anything, Georgetown, Myrtle Beach might have got hit the hardest, because they were not a few hours. The thing slowed down from 4 miles an hour to 2 miles an hour, and it was in between Wilmington and Myrtle Beach, and it just kind of sat there and moved at 2 miles an hour for a day or so. It took a day and a half or so, almost 2 days, for it to go through South Carolina. So it rained and rained and rained, but we got lucky, because right at the last minute before landfall, I saw it take a jut to the northwest, which put it, even though at one point as the eye started to break up, we were at the bottom of the eye. So you can imagine we were still feeling, a little anxious, but it kind of, we got a lot of wind and a lot of rain for better part of a day, maybe about 16 hours. And then we had it drizzled for like another day, just drizzled, like it was just, and it was dark for 3 or 4 days. And if you looked into the north, it was just dark, and it was 400 miles wide. So even though it was 100 miles above me, I still had 100 miles on the other side of me that was all clouds and circulation that was breaking up and all. So, but all I can say is, you can Google anything if you want to do any kind of relief. I noticed Facebook had some, like if you log onto Facebook, they've got a fundraiser going on there if you want to contribute to any kind of people that need relief. The death toll wasn't extraordinary, but they've lost a lot. In fact, they've lost more people after the damn, hurricane than they did during the hurricane, I think. Amazingly enough, they evacuated. They tried to evacuate everybody. A lot of people are stubborn, and they ended up getting rescued off the top of their house or something. But you literally
do that. If you're in line from a hurricane, they tell you to get the fuck out. Get the fuck out.
Yeah, if you're
probably a good reason.
Because, again, it's a storm surge, especially if you're on the north side of it. If you're on the north or west side of it, you're going to catch, and if you're near the coast, and you're in a low lying, or like we call the low country here, and I live in a swamp. So I'm always out at risk. But again, I was lucky, and we were a little bit, we were west of it almost the whole time. And then it just got a little bit, went a little higher, and just started its turn to go north, and then kind of left us alone. So we had residual winds. We still had wind gusts and stuff for a couple of days, but like I said, we were on that back side of the circulation. And so, like I said, it drizzled for a couple of days. And all I did was, I had some tree limbs that broke, but nothing real big that I've noticed so far. But it did hammer the hell out of my brand new privacy fence. So I'm pissed off about that. But my dogs made it. All the animals made it through. All my family is okay. So as far as I'm going in that respect, I came out smelling like a rose on this one. But it was a little scary. I was worried about the flooding, because if it would have gone a little bit south of where it went, I would have been potentially in a high flood area, you know, because I'm a very low area here.
Does that make you think about how to prep in the future? Or?
No, I've been going through this for 40 years. So I pretty much, it's just, you know, I went and bought a bunch of beer and, you know, and we get ready. I bought a bunch of propane because I have, you know, we have the residence, then we have my studio, which I'm in, which is a big RV, and I've got a propane stove and a propane potential. Well, I don't use it, but my refrigerator can be run off of gas instead of electricity. And so I went and bought a bunch of propane and a bunch of beer and a bunch of ice, and I was ready for the lights to go out. And then I sat here and watched you know, I'd go back and forth between watching something on Netflix or something, and then back to see where it had done. But it kind of got to where it wasn't moving, and they were updating the information. Like it was every 6 hours or so, or 4 hours. It would be like 2 o'clock, and it'd be the same shit for 4 hours. So once you saw it, unless they were on the ground, which they did, especially here, there was a lot of people from all the news, you know, stations on the ground.
So what kind of preparations did you do for getting ready for the storm to protect your plants, or what kind of
Well, I don't have anything outdoors growing, so I just got a bunch of trees and blackberries growing all over right now. I'm in the process of rejuvenating my farm and converting it to. I'm gonna still probably do everything. I don't know if I'll still do straight hydroponics, but I've already been dabbling in different conventional, and I've got some nice beds, and I think I'm going to take the beds that I've worked on the past couple of years, and I'm going to go ahead and make that a small K&F bed outdoors and see how that works. And then in the greenhouse, I am not sure, because I may or may not, there's not a whole lot I can say about it, but I might have a partner coming in, you know, to give me an influx of some cash, because he's interested in getting in the greenhouse business, and I need the cash. And he kind of went where he was going to do it. Then he bought another business. So I talked to him, and he asked me a bunch of questions. So I went in there today, and I said, hey, by the way, I said, I really feel like you were wanting to go commercial. Were you wanting to just have your own greenhouse at home, or commercial? Because he'd visited some of my neighbors, that, you know, greenhouse neighbors. And I said, well, I got an entire network of people, you know, I can, you know, if for anything, but I said, and then he told me about he didn't really have the cash because he bought the business. I said, well, that's perfect, because I wanted to offer you an opportunity to possibly come into partnership with me, because I've got the land and I've got the greenhouse, or I've got a greenhouse partially. Well, I've got a greenhouse built, but I've got 72 more feet by 30. So I got another 23 or 2,400 feet on the ground. And part of that was the influx. It costs, you know, for you guys just starting up and don't have a lot of capital to start with. It's hard to make any money with a small operation, but you can learn what you're doing. But it's also hard to make it real as big as you need, and then come up with the plastic to cover the damn thing, because that you're talking if I build the whole thing, we're talking about almost $2,000 in plastic to put over it, you know. So, and not to mention now the plumbing, I can deal with the plumbing, and, you know, I'd definitely have to buy a much bigger pump. But I think we're going to convert it into aquaponics and K&F kind of stuff. I want to try K&F both indoor and outdoor, because I'm enamored with it, and the fact that the aquaponics style I'd be using, for the most part, I'm not sure if I'll do lettuce that way. I might just use regular aquaponics, but for lettuce. But I'm not sure about that yet. But the dual root zone is something that I can apply the same lactobacillus and the same fruit ferments that FPJ, right? The FPJ I can add it to both the aquaponics and the K&F beds. So I think it's going to be an exciting time for me this year if everything works out with my personal legal issues with the estranged wife. But you know, because I'm trying to stay here. And I'm trying to, you know, I don't want to leave. So I'm trying to come up with a positive plan to be motivated and try to get this done this year. And maybe because I found this fella that might inject some cash into the operation, And I talked him into right off the bat, not trying to get too crazy. Like he was talking about, well, how many, you know, he'd like to do microgreens. We talked about microgreens like Josh did, you know, and I said, I mean, that's a smart thing. I said, but we don't need to build, you know, shelves upon shelves upon shelves going vertical until we get some customers. I said, because you've spent all this money, then you grow all this food and you got nowhere to sell it. So I said, let's get it all set up. And, you know, so we're going to try to start small and, you know, get him in and build the rest of the greenhouse as we start developing clients from what we can grow in my small operation. But so that's about what I'm doing. And that's about all I can tell you about the hurricane anymore, except lastly, once again, if you want to donate for anybody around Wilmington or anything that need relief, you know, the Red Cross takes donations, and they're out there busting their butt. I can't tell you every dollar goes to the people, but there are other funds. Facebook has one, and I'm sure they're all over the place. Everywhere you look, everybody's always putting up something to raise money for somebody. So that's what I would just say everybody's a member of Facebook. Just go there and contribute there, or, you know, Google it. I bet you there's, you know, just make sure that you put your money somewhere it's going to actually get to help somebody, and don't get scammed. So that's Roger from the Carolinas. Yeah.
What's new with you, Mr. Green Jeans? It's good to hear that Roger survived the hurricane.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I was worried about that myself. Yeah, the same old thing. The garden's looking beautiful. Thanks a lot, everybody sending me emails. God, it must be from this podcast. It's great. I don't mind answering them. I type a lot. Hey, look, we got a Macuna bean here, a little baby. Macuna pruriens. Whee. Whoops. You're dripping water there, baby. It's a cute little baby. Yeah. Yeah, what else? Not much to say. Oh, the genetics from up north turned out fantastic. Oh my gosh. We were testing them the other night. Oh boy.
How were the results?
Oh, amazing. I mean, all three of the single ones you gave me were really nice. Of course, those all turned out to be females. The Flow Chem Dog was really, really cool, really unusual, different, complex. A lot of deeper notes, you know, chocolatey things and stuff, and really super powerful, really strong. The brandy wine is really, really incredible. You know, distinct berry and sour, you know, sour berry, exactly like you would expect wine to be. And blue hash was, man, plants number 1 and 3 were stars of the show. Just unbelievable, fantastic.
It's a weird genetic, but so you get some really good plants out of this.
The colors are like old school indica. They're just the giant ones. I don't know if that's good outdoors up north or whatever in places, whether that's the kind of structure that's going to grow you a gigantic.
So that particular strain was designed for the plains in Colorado, for people that are like out in more windy areas. So it's a thicker stalked you know, plant that's designed
super stiff.
Yeah,
incredibly stiff, like yeah, like a paintbrush. I mean, it's like the stalks are hard. Yeah,
and indicas are naturally from a mountainous region anyway, where there's a lot of wind and even harsher climate at night, you know, and stuff like that.
And one of them was, one of the sisters, I think it was number 3, was really hard to regenerate. They all root right away, you know, but I put them back under the long daylight. And most plants, you know, go back to growing pretty soon, but I think it's an indica trait when the plant is very reluctant to regenerate. You know, so she's rooted and she's fine, you know, and she's kind of growing, but she's like, no, come on, I wanted to flower. Last one to go back to vegging, basically. So that's kind of funny. And Yeah, fantastic strain. Like I was saying, that I think that structure, that bud structure, is old school. I don't know if that's so great for growing up outdoors, upstate, in Northern California or Oregon or not.
Real
I think
dense.
probably
Getting
not. Well,
real.
no, I mean yeah, because of the structure, it's the kind of thing that outdoors it's going to make like a Coke bottle or bigger, and yeah, it'll be dense, and that's really prone to the humidity's going up at 50%, temperature's going down every night. You're pretty much
Yeah,
almost definitely.
those strains are definitely adapted to lower humidity, but
Yeah.
lower they can make them shine for sure.
Yeah, you could do it. You can definitely do it. But I'm just saying you'd be edging it with that structure, I think. I mean, I'm not sure because I'm not an expert in growing upstate there and in those environments, but I think I've seen a lot of sort of a transition away from that. That's why I was saying the term old school, which is funny because
Oh yeah,
it's
just
not
those
really,
big,
it's
fat,
kind of new school, but
buds the size of your arm. They don't really grow those too much anymore. Everyone wants their fucking cookies that takes fucking 4 times long to fucking trim. I hate it. I fucking hate it. I hate growing those strains. I like my big fat girls that are big, thick. Like my girl's thick and meaty. It works good.
Well, that's exactly what a couple of these blue hash plants are. So I know. So now I know what direction you're taking them with. Unfortunately, and I have the male, although he's kind of been looking male and both female. He's having a little bit trouble transitioning back to the growing stage as well himself. And I think he's just throwing a little bit of a fit. He's definitely a male, but I was just like, so we'll see about him.
It's weird. I had a CBD strain earlier this year, and if I put it under like 14 to 16 hours, it's fine. It'll be a female. If I put it under 24 hours light, it will herm. It will not tolerate no nighttime.
I like hearing that. I mean, I hate hearing that. I mean, if you want to go 24/0, but I disagree with 24/0. So I love the fact that the 14 to 16 hour light photo period comes back because I believed it, and this whole panel believes that it is better. You get a better plant, and you get more females. I still believe that you get. Yeah, now Mr. Green used to tell me it's 50-50.
Well, it's not just that, but also
that way.
The other thing about using those more reasonable day lengths is that for breeding, exactly like when Frenchie was saying, oh, you can't, if you breed plants indoors, they're going to be only adapted to indoors, and I think that is true because a lot of the breeders use these really super long
okay, so it comes down to let's quantify. Not to interrupt you for a second, but let's quantify that statement. It's not that they're not used to that. It's the VPD. To go further back to what we were talking about earlier in the show, the VPD, the vapor pressure deficit, the water saturation rate, and the humidity and the temperature combined, the water saturation rate, that's the controlling factor. And not only does it control the factor of the plants, it controls the microbes. That is the factor, one of the main factors that controls what tree level is on a mountain. It's the microbes and what level the microbes can tolerate and live in the soil before they can't live anymore. That's why you can have mountain ranges directly next to each other with completely like 1,500 foot different tree levels. And it makes no sense if you think about it in terms of just looking at it from a latitude range. It makes zero sense. But if you look at it strictly in terms of the microbial biodiversity, it makes 1,000% sense. Just to further support what you're saying. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I apologize. I just wanted to break down the science of what you're saying.
Yeah,
and that kind of answers the question people have about what makes an indoor and an outdoor strain. That's the difference right there. If it's all bred for indoors, that VPD, the difference it'll be different. You can control it more indoors, but outdoors it might have a bigger fluctuation. The plant will adapt to that if it's bred and it's genetically right. Is that what we're saying?
Oh yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that, as long as you maintain a fair degree of variability in your stuff, and I think it's important to, in your breeding, and I think it's important to maintain, you know, day lengths that are kind of similar to what's outdoors. You know, what's, you don't necessarily not in your area. I mean, I think my area is pretty far south. I probably use a day length for vegging that's a little bit more equal to north of me a ways, I'm sure. But you know, I think a lot of those things goes a long ways towards being able to, when you make selections indoors, plants are going to be more similar to the outdoors. Plus, I use a fully open door to my, everything's sharing. You know, I'm sleeping on top of the, you know, I'm breathing the same air as my plants. You know, I don't. I'd try, if I could, I'd sleep in a greenhouse. That sounds really wonderful. You know, it's just about like that. I mean, I would never. I don't even advocate using a closed tent or whatever. Of course, the plants need to breathe air, and my back door is often open, and so I'm actually, to tell you the truth, I just brought a plant in from outdoors. Like, for example, when I put a bunch of them outdoors, you know, if they have anything like mites on them or other kinds of bugs, the problem goes away because outdoors there's, you know, dudes that like to eat them. You know what I mean? They all of a sudden become a tasty morsel for all these other critters. And then I brought that plant back in, and I noticed I haven't had to spray any of the other plants underneath this that light there for like a week or a week and a half, or I haven't had to take them out and wash them or anything. And I was feeling underneath them, and they don't have any spider mites on them. So I guess I must have brought in some predators from the backyard. You know, I'm an advocate more of kind of bringing you know, bringing the nature in rather than locking it out. You know, this is only a gallon of dirt that this plant is in, but at least a half of this is soil from the backyard. You know, it's not you know, it's not potting soil. I got a bunch of, I think I got a lot of soil microbes going as well. I've been composting, you know, here for the whole 20 years or whatever I've lived in this apartment.
The last couple of years, I don't know if you've used this at all, but horse manure is really awesome for maintaining microbes. It's very low in nitrogen. It's hard to burn your plants with it. You can mix in a little bit each time you do your compost, and it's great in between runs.
What is it again? Say it again. Steve, huh?
Sorry, 1 second.
I
gotta stop the beeping here. Hold on.
He said horse manure, Doug. I mean,
oh yeah.
I'm sorry.
Right on. I screwed up my headphones. But yeah, I'm really a believer in bringing the outside in as much as possible. Like, that's my general philosophy. I know my plants are a lot healthier for, you know, for the for the compost and as much of the natural soil as possible. You know, I don't advocate. I was always trying to talk these guys up north. They're growing in the net bags, you know, above ground completely, and I don't really agree with that. And some of them are telling me, you know, oh, there's gophers and shit like that. And that's true. They're really only in the surface, and there's other ways to beat that. You know, you can dig a $50 hole. And
so one thing I noticed about gophers fucking hate nightshades. So if you plant tomatoes, even ground creeping tomatoes around your cannabis plants, and have the root systems kind of like as a barrier around your weed plants, those gophers do not like to cross that. It was my only way we could grow anything down near San Diego. Was because if we didn't do that, they would maul through our roots. But if we had those tomato roots intertwined, especially with the non-sugary ones, the more bitter, more like sandwichy tomatoes seem to be the ones that had the higher histamine levels in the root system that really didn't.
Higher in acid, wouldn't it be? Higher in acid.
Actually, it's histamine. So they actually have histamine in the roots. It's the same thing that sets off your sinuses. I don't know if you ever noticed, if you harvest tomatoes and you dig up the roots, when you're fucking with the roots, it sets off your sinuses. It makes your eyes and your nose water. It's the histamine.
Well, they're very fibery too, and they're all over the place. You know what I mean? Exactly in that range that the gophers like to chew around. You know what I mean? That's the thing. They're always in like this much, right at the
But
top.
also remember, nightshades are poisonous. You cannot eat tomato leaves, for example. It's not good for you at all.
Exactly.
They have a natural.
Roots are probably even worse.
I mean, tomatoes weren't even known to be edible until 200 years ago. So
Yeah.
Think about that for a minute.
Love tomatoes.
Totally. Yeah.
Tomatoes were thought to be poisonous because the plant was poisonous for a very, very, for thousands of years. That was the case. So people forget that.
Yeah.
Another thing, brassica.
Back to the test.
Is another great one for the crops. People forget that broccoli, cauliflower, kale, not Swiss chard, collard greens, all of those, broccolini, all of those were mustard, 150 years ago. Those are all new crops. None of those existed 150 years ago. Yeah. Cabbage is in the same family as well. So a lot of the cabbage was a little bit longer lineage, but same family at least. But all of these are they like a little bit of salt in the soil. They're water loving. They're cold tolerant. They'll tolerate frost. It's almost universal across all of those crops. They're all came from the same plant. That's why the greens taste the same, basically.
Very cool.
So Doug, you were talking about the tent. You wanted to say something about tents?
Oh, the test. The Shirley Temple was fantastic. Shirley Temple was amazing, incredible. I mean, it's amazing. It's fantastic. It's great. That is one good plant, Shirley Temple. So maybe the star of the show.
You got clones off of that?
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely.
Might have to get So I was a little bit of a dumbass and fucked up my light schedule. I might have to get some new cuts of Oreo off you, but they're flowering very, very nicely.
Nice.
I don't feel so bad because I've messed up my light schedule this past grow too.
Well, I've been out of town a lot lately. I've been traveling between vacation, the Canadian license, meetings for the California license, and consulting for people. I've been just physically not where the plants are a lot, so it's kind of fucked up my schedule. But they're things I kind of need to. They're more priority than a couple of plants. So as much as I love them, I'd rather let my personal garden suffer in place of career. Sorry.
It's a well backed up plant anyway. It's in at least 3 or 4 or 5.
I figured if push come to shove, I could probably get access to the genetics again. Worst case scenario. So the plants are doing just fine. They're healthy. They're just I didn't get cuts off of them in time.
Isn't the Shirley Temple the CBD plant?
Yes.
So Shirley Temple is one of the only strains in Colorado that ever broke the 2020 club. So we'll see if
it wasn't weak. It's not low in THC.
No, it's a powerful THC and CBD plant. It's high in both, which is weird. Yeah. And I don't know if you noticed, it's real tricky, like all over the whole plant too.
Amazing. This one's a really, really nice plant. It has a really complicated, a really complex smell, and taste profile. The terpenes are incredible. Can't wait to try pressing it.
Oh yeah, Dutch Bloom. Josh, Dutch Blooms. He's normally on the panel. Asks, "Are you crossing it with the wizard?"
That's exactly. And then.
You know what I was going to say? It's funny. Josh asked a question. Going to say, "Damn, Josh is going to hate that he missed the show tonight."
The thing is that. The thing is, I was gonna, and I'm gonna send the seeds to him too. But this round actually, I didn't get to cross it with the white wizard. I know that's exactly what he wants, and that is a fantastic idea, and that's gonna do it. I'm gonna do exactly that next time. This time, it got crossed with the Grand Slam male, who looks really nice. He was a single. He was the only male. There was only the pair of them. I forget. I think he only gave me 2 seeds of those, or maybe only just 2 germinated. I don't know what. But and they turned out to be male and female. And the female is fantastic. The lady Grand Slam is really good. So you know, it's a complete test on her husband because I have nothing to base it on. I'm just going, well, he must have been gifted to me. I think Steve had to, I'm going on your magic choosing, Steve. Yeah. You've been hitting like home runs in every bean, you know, in a row. So it's so weird. The sex ratio is very, as I said before, is really unusual. You know, all the pairs had a male, and all the multiples only had one male.
Cool.
Incredible. And all the singles were all females. So there was no double males in anything, even the Bubba Kush Sour OGs. So it was only a single male there too.
I love when I have a single that turns out to be a female. I just love it.
Yeah, it was like, I guess, you know, Steve, from now on, I mean, I should just like bring whole batches of seeds up to him and have him, you know, can you pick me out 10 of those?
Right now, I'm a little bit in between places. I'm about to go look at a new spot. So I have like two separate rental situations between the building I live in and the property I live in. Well, I live in a anyways, it's complicated, but at any rate, one of the two factors of my living situation has changed, so I need to find a different living space. But I have a new space I'm moving to next month, and I just have to switch spaces and reset up my studio and everything. So I may or may not at the end of the month have a week in between. I'm probably going to be able to pull everything off in between anyway. While I'm moving, I have a space I'm kind of staying in between the two places. But it's all good. It's going to be great. I actually have a nice bigger spot. It's actually moving because I can afford to live in a bigger spot, which is great because all the business stuff is working good. We have our application in Canada. Everything's moving swimmingly up there. We're hoping by the end of the year we'll be able to sell product in Canada, tentatively. I do not have a final date yet, but hopefully you can buy our product up there. If not, beginning of next year. California sometime soon. In the air right now, but moving forward, it is progressing steadily. Had a bunch of great meetings on that. What else is new? Dr. Rakocy is coming out November 3rd and 4th. He is the guy that started off all of commercial aquaponics and the current model that is used by everyone. Please check him out at Ouroboros Farms. I'm teaching a medicinal herbs class this weekend at Ouroboros Farms. If you're interested in medicinal herbs and in Northern California, check it out over at San Francisco. I'll be in Half Moon Bay teaching medicinal herb classes at Ouroboros Farms. Next month, I will be teaching the Aquaponic Cannabis class. Also, if you're in Connecticut, please go check out, or in the vicinity, please go check out the Aquaponics Association Conference. I know Ken Armstrong from Ouroboros Farms is presenting there this weekend. I'm holding down the fort here we had a bunch of meetings today and Friday with a cannabis license, and I couldn't make it out there for the weekend, but I do apologize. But please go support Ken and the Aquaponics Association over there in Connecticut if you are in the area. They have a bunch of cool stuff going on. And then check out the Science of Regenerative Organic Cannabis Conference. I know Josh has been working very hard with a bunch of other people to get that all up and running. You get the new dates out. I know he was on the show last time with dates and everything. I will make sure they get pushed up into the description and everything like that before the end of the week. I don't have the current dates at the moment. I apologize. I do have them. I just didn't get a chance to copy and paste them. But I want to make sure that also gets plugged there. I think we have a link in that. If not, I'll make sure that gets in there as well. And we have those in both January and March in Vancouver, Portland, Oregon, Maine, and Humboldt, and Michigan. What's the one in Michigan? I'm sorry, not Portland, Maine, or Oregon. Portland, Maine. Portland, yeah. Maine, Vancouver,
Humboldt, Michigan,
Humboldt
and
and Michigan. Ann Arbor, I think it is, in Michigan. Sorry, Josh, if you want to help me out here. I know you're watching live.
in Ann Arbor, Grand Rapids.
Anyways. Oh, he says Washington. Oh, never mind. Washington. No, anyways. Josh will have all the information. Sorry, I'm a bit tired and stoned. It's been a long day and a bunch of dabs, and I've been in the car a bunch. I've been traveling a fucking shit this week.
I want to shout out to Aquaponic Dummy. He's at home now. He's it's kind of weird. The city took half of his stuff, and I don't know. He doesn't know he's going through the thing up there, but he's back home, and I got to talk to him yesterday a little bit. Well, we chatted a little bit, and just wanted to give a shout out to Aquaponic Dummy for all the help he's done for people in the past. Been good through a rough patch.
We'll have to get him on to talk about his trials and tribulations, because I want to make sure that, like, all the warriors that are going through all the bullshit right now are like can put their stuff on record, so that when 10 years from now, these fucking teeny boppers that have been buying vape pens at the fucking store for 10 years or 5 years or 2 years and had never heard about how fucking shitty it was for all of us to get through the cannabis industry and to get it to them to where they can go buy their damn vape pen or buy their joints or buy their bag of weed or buy their eighth at the dispensary, and hear about all the shit that we had to go through, because a lot of these people, you know, in 10 years, they're not going to remember. They're just going to be used to it.
Yeah, because they'll just have it. Yeah, they won't think about it.
And that's why it's important that we document. That's why I like to get all these OGs and older guys on the show, because they can tell us about this. Okay, so Josh says Ann Arbor, Michigan, Portland, Maine, and Vancouver, and Humboldt.
Okay.
For the
which one is Chris Trump going to be at, Josh?
We have a bunch of different people on coming up. There we have Susan Wainwright Evans. We have I forget who else is on the list right now. Josh can probably whatever, but Josh isn't on the list. He'll be on the next. You know what? Fuck it. I'm gonna stop botching it. Josh will be on next week to tell you all about the wonderful details. Go check out the website. I'll make sure it's in the link. Fuck it. We're done. Go check out ouroborosfarms.com. If you want links to that, if you want to hang out with me, learn from me. Well, it's a couple of cool announcements as well. We're working on an awesome new schedule for next year with a bunch of really fucking awesome guests, a bunch of one-time guests. Again, kind of like we did this year at Ouroboros Farms. We're bringing a bunch of really unique people. They're talking on specific topics, or people that are kind of been doing it a long time and have a different outlook on things, and just trying to diversify the knowledge base for people interested in high-level aquaponics at Ouroboros Farms in a setting that's an industrial, commercial aquaponics farm. It's going to be great, and that'll be out sometime in the next 45 days. We'll have next year's schedule. We have a bunch of cool people lined up though, and I'm super excited. Not only through the end of this year, but next year, to learn from some of the people we're bringing in and synergizing with. We've talked about some of them. We had a show in July that we weren't able to quite pull together because of a last minute issue with one of the speakers, but we're going to pull off. Instead of doing all the speakers in one event, which we realize is kind of complicated for both the guests and for everything else, we're going to break things down and just have individual speakers instead, because we found not only that's more what you guys want, but it's also more what it's easier for us to schedule with these people. So we're gonna break it down that way and let you guys decide which kind of guests you want us to keep bringing on back to the farm, and which ones you guys really value. So we're gonna really break that out and bring you guys a lot of diversity and kind of really make it a unique experience at Ouroboros Farms that is very different than any other place you're going to get with an aquaponics farm in terms of knowledge base. Nobody else is getting the diversity that we get there, and no one can even attempt to claim to. And it's really wonderful, Ken and all the work that he does to bring that out and to provide a classroom space at his farm there, for all these people to present and break down that education and share that knowledge. So thanks again to Ken and all the fine work that he does over there. So
Ken's a really cool guy too, man.
Oh yeah, hell yeah. So I guess unless you guys want to have anything else, you guys want to tell people how to find you there, Mr. Green Jeans?
Yeah, greenjeansgarden.com. Thanks a lot. I've taken Steve's class up there. It's fantastic. Anybody who hasn't done it has to go. It's really great. You guys will love it. Thanks a lot.
About you, Roger? How do people find you? You on that
Hey,
wonderful forum
you
over
still
there.
find me. I love growingmarijuana.com, and I've got something brewing, and I'll have to announce it later because every time I talk about something, it gets bogged down. So I'm going to get it lit up, and then I'll tell you about it. But yeah, we're going to be having some fun this year. I'm trying to do something to have some fun. It's been a rough year. So come check me out at ilovegrowingmarijuana.com, and we've got a lot of great people over there, friendly staff and a friendly group of members, and we try to keep it that way so that, and we don't mind. We've got a lot of experts, but we really treasure the idea that we teach beginners, and we teach you how to grow successfully the first time. If you follow our simple methods, regardless of what method you want to use, if you follow the guidance from the experts and the staff on the forum, and read the well, we got the blog, we got a over 500 article blog there. If you read that stuff, we produce some really good first time growers. And in fact, I like to brag, we've got at least 2. We've had a Bud of the Month contest for a couple of years now. We're monthly. We run a contest from on the forum, and then we give a prize to the winner each month. And we've had 2 first time growers win the contest. They joined the forum. We taught them how to grow. They entered their bud in the Bud of the Month contest, and the membership voted them the best bud of the month. So I feel proud about that. So I know there's not a lot of beginners probably listening to this show, but we opened up an aquaponics section last year, and since we've had limited participation in that, it is active though. I'm glad to say it's active. But if any of you out there want to come to a forum and talk about aquaponics, just come on over to ilovegrowingmarijuana.com and go in the aquaponics section. If you have any great grow facts or anything, we can add that to the grow facts section too. Be glad to, like we said, we're trying to share the knowledge, and it's a free forum, so you can pretty much get answers to anything you want. And if we can't find it out right off the top of our head, we'll call one of these guys that's on this panel, and we'll find out the right answer. So we've got the mojo going on here. Thank you, Steve.
Awesome. All right. Well, here's you guys again. And thank you all for joining us. Next week, Ron Wallace. I do apologize. He was originally supposed to be on this week. We didn't have a last minute. He called and canceled about 1 p.m. today. Eric was kind enough. Eric was lined up for next week, and he was kind enough to just jump in and swap out with Ron. And I can't thank both of them enough for swapping places. So thank you, Eric, for filling in, and thank you, Ron, for joining us next week. I know you had a last minute issue to cancel on us and postpone until next week. But Ron Wallace, the Wallace Pumpkins, the guy who's grown more large pumpkins than any other human being on earth, will be with us next week. So, what better way to kick off, October than with Ron Wallace? So thanks again, and we'll see you guys next week. Take care. Cheers.